In psychology, there is a special term called Adal syndrome, which refers to the morbid obsession of one person with another. The affliction received its name in honor of the youngest daughter of the famous French writer, Adal Hugo. She was a very attractive girl and a talented pianist, but unrequited love noticeably affected her mental state. As a result, the beauty simply poisoned the life of herself and her lover, who for years pursued, pretending to be his wife, then ruined his career and personal life. Unfortunately, 43 years of her 84 years, Adele spent in the walls of a psychiatric hospital. It is worth noting that the condition in which one person is overly interested in, or even obsessed with, another so much that he loses the ability to control his emotions, a fairly common phenomenon. In most cases, an experienced psychologist can help. Sometimes hospitalization and more thorough therapy are required, but sometimes such obsession borders on insanity, pushing a person to desperate, unpredictable, and extremely cruel actions. The case of Emma Young Stig in 2008 shook the whole of Europe and became one of the most brutal in the history of Swedish forensic science. The perpetrator could be recognized as insane, and because of the lack of hard evidence, the case and even wanted to close, but he showed his true face in the courtroom. An immature young family, Emma Young Stig was a native of Stockholm, where she was born on February 16, 1985, where almost all of her childhood and adolescence passed. She was brought up in a simple family where she was the younger of two daughters and grew up with her older sister, Katharina. At the age of 19, the girl married a young man named Nicholas, with whom she began dating while still in high school. The chosen one was not much older than the girl, and at the time of marriage the bride was already expecting a child. In 20 years, Emma first became a mother, giving birth to a son who was named Max, and a year and a half later she gave birth to a second child, a daughter, Saga. But, despite the appearance of two common heirs, the couple were still too young and were not ready for family life and the hardships of everyday life. They constantly quarreled over trifles, could not find a common language, and soon after the birth of their daughter, decided that they should separate. But then, the question of custody of children, which was solved very hard and painful. Nicholas sought not only to help the children financially, but also to take a direct part in their lives and upbringing. Emma was not against it, but soon she had a new romantic relationship. She moved to a small town called Arboga, located about 150 kilometers from Stockholm, to her new lover and took the children with her. The ex-husband was against it because he wanted to be able to see his daughter and son every day. Ex-spouses repeatedly met in court to settle the matter, and Nicholas even threatened Emma, which she immediately reported to the police. Problems could not be solved peacefully in any way, and each of the parents began to seek sole custody. New love. Emma met a guy named Torgny Hellberg through the internet. They quickly found a common language, got close, and a romantic relationship began between them. The young man was not confused by the fact that the 23-year-old girl already has two heirs from a previous marriage, because he had long dreamed of a family and was ready to accept them as his own children. The newly married couple first lived in a small house, which was inherited by Torgny by inheritance. But when the lovers decided to get married, they moved to a larger house, where they could live comfortably, and each of the children would have their own cozy room. The man at that time had a good job with a decent salary, and Emma was engaged in raising small children as well as creating a home, but, being a designer by education, was going to work in the future in the specialty. The couple planned to play a wedding in the summer of 2008, but these plans were not destined to fulfill. Brutal massacre. March 17, 2008 was an ordinary Monday. Torgny went to work early in the morning and Emma stayed home with 3-year-old Max and 1.5-year-old Saga. In the evening, the girl was preparing dinner, waiting for her fiancé to return, and at the same time, she was chatting online with her sister Katarina, discussing a gift for their parents' upcoming wedding anniversary. At about 6:30 in the evening, Emma received a call from Torgny, warning her that he was late for work. He said they could start dinner without him. After the brief phone conversation, Emma continued with her household chores, fed the children, and then sat down at the computer again, continuing to text with her sister. At 07:07 p.m., their communication was abruptly interrupted literally half a word. Katarina thought it was very strange, because she saw that her sister was typing a message to her, but for some reason never sent it. 5 minutes later, a worried Katarina called Emma, but she didn't pick up. Then she dialed Torgny's number to find out what had happened. The young man was on his way home from work and was just approaching the house, so he assured Katarina that everything was fine, that Emma was probably distracted by the kids, and that she would call her back as soon as she could. When the man arrived at the threshold, he was surprised to find that the front door was unlocked. When he went inside, he immediately noticed the mess, thinking that the children had made a mess while playing. But then he saw brown stains and stains on the floor, realizing with horror that it was blood. Hellberg called Emma and the children's names loudly several times, but no one responded. In the hallway on the floor, the man saw a strange object, thinking at first that it was a doll, because the figure was lying in a completely unnatural pose. As he got closer, however, he realized that it was Saga in a pool of her own blood. Her head and face were disfigured beyond recognition and turned into a bloody mess. A little farther away lay her brother in a similarly horrifying state, with a fractured skull. Their mother was also lying on the floor, covered in blood and in an unnatural posture. Her face was badly shattered and disfigured. It seemed that all of them were no longer showing signs of life. Shocked, Tony pulled out his cell phone with trembling hands and dialed the emergency number, reporting what had happened. At that moment, Emma shuddered and let out a loud, long groan. Police officers and paramedics immediately arrived on the scene and found a weak pulse in all three victims and quickly began resuscitation. The picture was horrifying. No one understood what kind of beast could do this to a young woman and her children. But saving their lives was the priority. So, first of all efforts were thrown at getting the victims of the attack to the nearest hospital for assistance. Fighting for lives and the beginning of the investigation. From the outset, the arriving paramedics expressed doubts about whether the victims could be brought to the hospital alive at all. However, all three were still alive when they arrived at the medical facility. All were diagnosed with open head injuries, with severe brain damage and extensive blood loss. No prognosis was given by the doctors, but only did the best they could. Max and Saga were in critical condition. Even if they had managed to save their lives, it was unlikely that they would have ever been able to even breathe on their own. The condition of their mother was assessed as very serious, but stable. The young woman was put into a medically induced coma and hooked up to life support machines, hoping her body could cope. While doctors were fighting for the lives of the victims, forensic experts were working at the scene, trying to find clues and reconstruct the picture of the crime. Inside the house, chaos reigned. Scattered belongings, blood on the floor and walls. Unfortunately, the medics left behind a lot of clutter, as well as moving certain items around to allow access to the victims. The floor where Emma, Max, and Saga were lying was literally trampled on, and now the medics had to figure out what footprints belonged to them and if the perpetrator's prints were there. Remarkably, the intruder had massacred the three victims at most in 13 minutes. Since the last message from Emma to her sister was sent at 07:07 p.m., and at 07:20 p.m. already received a call to the police from a frightened Torgny. That said, the brutality with which the perpetrator massacred them spoke of some personal motive and a deep dislike for the victims. The weapon of the crime was a blunt and heavy object, presumably a hammer, which the mysterious criminal used to bludgeon his victims with ferocity. However, nothing of the kind could not be found at the scene, from which the natural conclusion was that the perpetrator took it with him. First suspect. From the start, Hellberg was the prime suspect. He was not married to Emma and was not the father of her children, and therefore it was suggested that perhaps a domestic quarrel between the couple could turn into a bloodbath. The grief-stricken man was immediately questioned. But he had an ironclad alibi. Firstly, he was really late at work, which was confirmed by his boss and colleagues. And secondly, at the time of the brutal massacre of his loved ones, he was walking down the street and was caught on a number of CCTV cameras. Nevertheless, Torney was decided to take a detailed statement, as he might have seen or heard something important that could help in the investigation of the crime. However, he could not remember anything specific, for it was business as usual until he saw the mess and the bodies lying on the floor. The only thing that alerted him was the unlocked front door, which could indicate that Emma had let the criminal in. After questioning, the man was released. By then, he had already informed his fiancée's family, and Emma's parents immediately rushed to Arboga from Stockholm. Together, they went by car straight to the hospital to the victims, but on the way there, they learned from the news on the radio terrible news. Max and Saga died of their injuries without regaining consciousness. Ex-husband's revenge? The new suspect was Emma's ex-husband and father of the children, Nicholas. The couple had been divorced for more than a year and parted peacefully. They did not manage. They constantly quarreled, sued for custody of the children, and the man even threatened the ex-spouse, which she reported to the police. It seemed that everything fits. After the breakup of the young woman took the children and took them to another city to his new chosen one, and their father, not having achieved custody through the court on the grounds of hostility to Emma, decided to take a desperate step and in a fit of rage and crucified the heirs. Nicholas was immediately tracked down and taken into custody, but the man seemed crushed by the news of Max and Saga's deaths, sobbing and constantly asking if there was some mistake. When he was charged with what had happened, he was at first stunned, and then began shouting that he would never hurt his children, whom he adored. When asked where Nicholas was at the time of the crime, he replied that he was away in another city, where he went on business for a day. It sounded strange, but soon his alibi was confirmed. The man was indeed 120 miles away from the crime scene when someone was massacring his ex-wife and children. Searching for clues and fearing for the life of the sole survivor, forensic investigators remained active at the scene, trying to find any clues, evidence, or traces of the attacker. But the perpetrator had obviously worn gloves and left no fingerprints. With traces of shoes, everything was much more difficult because the house was visited by a dozen doctors who rendered assistance and took out the victims. Now it was necessary to collect all the footprints there and to find out which of them did not belong to the medics, Torgny or the victims themselves. The law enforcers were afraid that the criminal, having learned that Emma had survived, might sneak into the hospital and finish what he had started. After all, she was a crucial witness, and in case she came to her senses and could testify, she would certainly give him away. Therefore, a 24-hour guard was posted outside Young Stig's room. At the same time, neighbors were interviewed in search of possible witnesses. One woman recalled that at around 05 in the evening, a stranger in black clothes was walking around Emma and Torney's house. She thought it was strange, but she could not see the man's face because it was hidden by a hood. However, the neighbor suggested that it could be a girl because the figure was short and fragile. The same figure in black clothes and with a hood on his head also got into the lens of the street surveillance camera, located on the store a couple of minutes' walk from the scene of the crime. It also appeared to law enforcement that the woman in the video was a short, frail-looking girl. But who was she, and why would she wish harm on Emma and her children? The recording decided to show Torgny and to find out his opinion about who the stranger could be and whether he has any assumptions about it. Already from the first frames, the man began to change in his face, turned pale, and then said that it could be his ex-girlfriend, 31-year-old Christina Shurer, although he could not say for sure. Who is Christina Shurer? Torgny's former sweetheart was born in Hanover, Germany in 1977. When she was still a child, her father left the family and practically stopped communicating with his daughter, which negatively affected her mental state and behavior. The girl grew up willful and purposeful, but had a complex character. As a teenager, she went to the United States on an exchange program and lived in New York for several years. The girl received a good education in the field of history and archaeology, traveled extensively throughout Europe, taking part in excavations and expeditions. In the summer of 2006, she went to Greece, to the island of Crete, where she got a job in one of the popular hotels as a tour guide. There in July came on vacation 26-year-old Torgny, who immediately attracted Christina. He also liked this smart, interesting, and educated girl, with whom he had an affair from the first days of acquaintance. Shurer at that time was 29 years old, but a small age difference did not embarrass the couple. Their connection lasted for a week while the guy was vacationing in the hotel, and after his departure they continued to communicate by phone and correspond on the internet. A few months later, Christina came to Hellberg in Sweden and literally asked to stay at his house. Even then, such behavior seemed to Torgny too intrusive and even tactless. So when Christina offered him a weekend trip to the mountains, he refused and sincerely hoped that this was the last time they would meet. But the girl continued to call, write, and insist on a new meeting. In January 2007, during a phone conversation, Torgny told Christina that everything was over between them and they should not meet again, but Christina pretended not to hear it. She continued to call, asking to come to visit him, and calling Torgny to go on vacation with her. In the spring of 2007, Christina again came to Sweden and began to literally stalk the former boyfriend. She persuaded him to resume their relationship, although he honestly admitted that he is already dating another. Then Christina said that during the previous visit, forgot in his house something of the things, and she needs to take them away. Torgny agreed, but as soon as they crossed the threshold, the former lover tried to seduce him, and having received a firm refusal, said that he will still regret. 3 months later, Christina returned again and began to apologize for her behavior, again persuading the guy to get together, but he rejected her, and in the evening she called, saying that she swallowed pills because she does not want to live without him. Hellberg called her an ambulance and also called her family, telling them about Christina's antics and advising them to see a psychiatrist. After Shurer received the necessary care at the hospital, her mother took her away and placed her in a psychiatric hospital, where she spent more than a month. However, the treatment did not give much results, and the girl remained literally obsessed with her former lover, constantly thinking about how to get him back and inventing new reasons for meetings. In October 2007, Christina decided to move to Sweden and settled in the suburbs of Stockholm, where she rented an apartment with another girl. She started to pursue her ex-boyfriend again, and when she got to meet him, she told him that she had given birth to a son by him, but gave the child to a foster family. Torgny was shocked by this news, but what he was most interested in was when it had happened. The last time they had been intimate was more than a year ago, and after that, they had met 3 more times at different times, but Christine had shown no signs of pregnancy. She herself answered evasively, and each time added some new details. In January 2008, after a dozen unsuccessful attempts to meet with Torgny, Christina wrote him a message in which she told him that their son had been diagnosed with a certain hereditary disease, and now they should go to Germany together to see him. She also added that the child's adoptive father would contact him and give him the details. At this time, she and Emma were in the process of moving to a new home, and the girlfriend was aware of the whole story. She believed that Tony's ex-girlfriend was simply trying to lure him to Germany, and no son had ever existed. When Tony received a call from a man who introduced himself as the adoptive father of her and Christine's child, Tony, on Emma's advice, began to ask questions about when the boy was born, in which hospital it happened, and so on. The interlocutor was clearly annoyed, avoided answering in every possible way, and then, and after all, hung up the phone. So Hellberg finally came to the conclusion that no son never existed. Christine made up the whole story and asked someone from the acquaintances to play along. Christina's arrest and the search for evidence. After learning such a convoluted story, detectives quickly found out where the new suspect lived and went to the address. The door was opened by her roommate, who told them that Christina had hurriedly packed her things the day before and said that she was going back to Germany. A check showed that the girl had indeed left the country, so now the Swedish police had to seek help from their German colleagues to arrest her. On March 20th, a warrant was issued for her arrest. When the suspect was arrested, she claimed that there had been a mistake and that she had nothing to do with the massacre. But after she was taken to Sweden on March 29th, she immediately requested a meeting with Torney, which was denied. She was completely calm, but periodically asked to meet or call her ex again. Christina's rented apartment was thoroughly searched, and her phone and laptop were seized for inspection. All her clothes were thoroughly checked, but no traces of blood were found there. By then, investigators had worked out which of the bloody shoe prints at the scene did not belong to the medics and family members, so it was determined to be athletic, and from the tread pattern they even figured out the brand and appearance. The size matched the one worn by the suspect, but she herself claimed that she never had such a model of sneakers. However, this statement was quickly refuted, as the shoes were identified by her roommate. Much more interesting findings awaited detectives in Christina's laptop. It was full of photos of Torgny, both their joint, and those where the man was depicted alone or in the company of his new lover. Also, in a separate folder with a very unpleasant signature, contained pictures of Emma and her children, which the suspect copied from the rival's page in the social network. Shurer captioned each photo with insulting, threatening, and downright scary captions. In the recovered search history were found requests on how to commit a murder without leaving traces, how to hide traces of the crime, and how to divert suspicion from himself. Also in the notes, investigators found a plan of Emma and Torney's new home and notes that indicated when the man left for work and what time he returned, and some other notes regarding the family's daily routine. Interview with survivor. Emma's condition was stabilized, her vitals gradually began to improve, and towards the end of March, doctors decided to gradually bring her out of the medically induced coma. Upon awakening, she was still unable to speak because of the breathing tube, but her gaze was meaningful. It was clear that she recognized the relatives present in the room, but did not understand what had happened to her and how she had ended up in the hospital. As soon as the victim became a little stronger and was able to speak clearly, the police agreed to talk to her, but decided not to tell her what had happened to the children. And then it turned out that Emma had no memory of the events of that fateful day, and believed that she must have been in a car accident. She kept asking about the children and whether they were all right. At first, she was given evasive answers, but then her family and medical team decided that there was no point in withholding such information. When Emma was told about what had happened and that her babies were no longer alive, she became hysterical. The doctors had to sedate her, after which she fell asleep, and when she woke up, she did not remember the conversation and asked about the children again. This continued for several weeks, and during this time, the mother was told several times about the death of her daughter and son, but her brain apparently refused to accept this information, each time erasing it. After another month, Emma, accompanied by medics, decided to be brought to the scene. Once inside the house, she suddenly remembered everything. The young woman told how she was texting with her sister, setting the table, and the children were playing near her when there was a knock on the door. She opened the door and saw a dark, short female figure on the threshold, but when she asked what she wanted, she felt a sharp pain and her eyes went black. The figure skulked into the house, and the desperate mother, out of her last strength, tried to catch up with her to protect her children, but apparently fell in the hallway, where they tried to finish her off. The trial and the verdict. Christina continued to stubbornly deny her guilt. The weapon of the crime was never found, and almost all the evidence found was circumstantial, which gave her a high chance of getting away with it. However, Christina's roommate, when questioned, said that in March a hammer was missing from her toolkit. She produced the toolkit itself, and the investigation determined that the size and configuration of that brand of tool matched the murder weapon. But that evidence was also circumstantial. Detectives were able to find surveillance footage from a suburban bus station, where Shurer had traveled 3 times in the week before the crime. She herself could not explain why she visited Arbuga so often, but apparently the girl came to keep an eye on her future victims. The suspect was also unable to explain why she was searching the internet for information on how to cover up the crime and why she was collecting photos of Emma and her children. On July 29, 2008, the trial over Christina, who was accused of double murder with particular cruelty as well as attempted murder, began. The defendant herself behaved more than strangely. Upon entering the courtroom, she smiled and began to wave her hand, greeting those present. When she was asked questions about the massacre and was shown gruesome footage of the crime scene with mutilated bodies, she suddenly laughed. This suggested that the defendant was insane, but the appointed psychiatric examination established that the girl was sane and perfectly aware of what was happening. Consequently, she enjoyed what she had done and did not even try to hide it. When Emma was in the courtroom and saw Christina there, she fainted. When she was brought to her senses, she said that she finally remembered everything, and this face was the last thing she saw on that fateful day. Despite the defense lawyer's attempts to prove her client's innocence, the jury unanimously found her guilty on all counts. Christina was sentenced to life in prison with no right to ever be released. She was also ordered to pay 20,000 euros in compensation to Emma. No evidence was found that Christina had ever been pregnant and had given birth to a son by Torgny. As for Young Stig, her recovery process was long and arduous, but Torgny did not abandon his beloved. They were married in the summer of 2010. The couple are now raising 2 common heirs who know the sad story of their older brother and sister. The tragic story of a young school teacher named Lacy Peterson not only shocked the public with its unimaginable cruelty and inhumanity, but also served as a precedent for the adoption of a law of the same name, known as the Lacy and Connor Act. Connor was the name of her unborn son, who died with his mother, and the law itself was designed to protect children from violence before they were born, and to punish those who infringe on their lives and health. The case itself is far from unique, but the fact that a pregnant woman was abused by a close person who was supposed to protect and care for her is shocking and bewildering. Several TV documentaries have been made about the case. Despite the circumstantial evidence and controversial evidence, no one doubted the guilt of the defendant, and he himself, with all his appearance, demonstrated that he is not sorry and does not repent for what he did. This story is one of those that causes chills all over the body, but let's try to understand how it happened that the guy, who was considered a model family man, suddenly decided to commit such an atrocity. Who was Lacy Peterson? Lacy Denise Peterson, maiden name Rocha, was born in May 1975 in a small town of Modesto, located in the central part of the state of California. Her parents, Dennis Rocha and Sharon Anderson, were acquainted since high school. Their teenage romance led to marriage and the birth of 2 children, eldest son Brandon and daughter Lacy. Curiously, the mother named her daughter after a local beauty queen whom she herself admired. The family owned their own farm, so the children from a young age were accustomed to working in the field, as well as taking care of animals. The girl was very close to her mother. Together they grew a wonderful garden with flowers and fruit trees. Then Lacy first thought about connecting her future life with this occupation and getting a specialized profession. When the children were still small, the family faced a crisis. No matter how hard the spouses tried, but they could not save the marriage, and soon they officially divorced. The children, by mutual consent, remained to live with their mother in their hometown. 2 years later, Sharon remarried. Her chosen one was a friend of her youth named Ron Gransky. Ron treated his wife's children as his own, and in fact replaced their birth father, who after the divorce was not too interested in the life of the heirs. The girl even began to call him Daddy, and a couple of years later the couple had a common daughter who was named Emily. Lacy grew up a kind, sociable, and open girl. She always had a lot of friends. She studied well in school and was also a member of the cheerleading team. After receiving a high school education, the dark-haired beauty successfully passed exams and entered the prestigious California State University. She did not forget about her childhood dream and decided to become a landscape designer. Lacy has always been a creative person, good at drawing, so she found the chosen profession ideal for herself. Who is Scott Peterson? Scott Lee Peterson is also a native of California, only he was born in the large metropolis of San Diego, in the southwest of the state, in 1972, October 24th, in the family of Jacqueline Helena Leatham and Arthur Lee Peterson. The boy grew up in a fairly well-to-do family, and from an early age did not know anything to refuse. His father had his own business associated with the production of packaging materials, and his mother owned a store of designer clothes. By the way, her boutique was located in Hollywood, so among the regular customers were many celebrities. Scott, in childhood, began to show his difficult character, liked to be in the center of attention, did not tolerate bans or refusals, and in school about him spoke as a spoiled, capricious, and even arrogant child. From a young age, the boy played golf and even thought about a professional career in this sport. In his school years, he was friends with Philip Nicholson, nicknamed Lefty, the future professional golfer, who in 2012 was ranked second in the world rankings. As a teenager, Scott himself was among the best athletes in San Diego. After graduation, the young man became a student at one of the universities of the state of Arizona, where he, as a promising athlete, paid half of the cost of education. However, Peterson could not get a diploma because he was expelled for inappropriate behavior after a raucous party, drinking strong alcohol in the company of other students. After several months of reflection and searching for a suitable place, the young man applied to the University of California, where he first planned to study economics, but later changed his mind and transferred to the Faculty of Agriculture. By the way, this time Scott very seriously and responsibly approached the educational process, becoming an exemplary student, because his parents threatened to leave their son without a livelihood if he was once again expelled. Scott and Lacy, a love story. Young people met during the period of study at the university. Scott at that time began to work part-time in one of the local coffee shops, where there also worked as a waitress former classmate and close friend of Lacy. Lacy often stopped by to grab a bite to eat and see her friend, and at some point, she noticed the handsome young man. Scott also noticed the smiling petite brunette and began to pay her every possible attention. One day, when Lacy came to the coffee shop but didn't see her friend there, she decided to ask Scott what was wrong. They quickly got to talking, but since Scott had to work, Lacy wrote her phone number on a napkin so they could get in touch later. Scott called her back that evening, and an excited Lacy, immediately after talking to him, told her mother that she had been in touch with her future husband. A couple days later, he asked his new acquaintance out on a first date, and Lacy readily accepted. It's worth noting that Peterson had another passion besides golf, fishing, and he decided to invite Lacy to go deep-sea fishing in an open body of water. She accepted the offer, but she got seasick in the boat, so the couple had to quickly return to the shore. Family life. Nevertheless, after that not quite successful first date, the couple began to meet, and a couple of years later, they decided to start living together. Scott, by that time, finally abandoned his dreams of a professional career in sports and decided to start his own small business, and with the startup capital, he helped his parents. In the summer of 1997, after Lacy received her diploma, the lovers played a modest wedding in the traditional style, with a white dress, veil, and vows at the altar. They invited only family members and a few close friends to the celebration, and as a venue, they chose the popular Sycamore Mineral Springs Resort, located on the ocean in the western part of the state of California. After the wedding, the couple settled in the small resort town of San Luis Obispo, located between Los Angeles and San Francisco. There they decided to open their own sports bar, but the idea was doomed from the start. There were rumors that Scott's parents again helped with the implementation of the business plan, but they themselves later denied it, saying that their son was a poor businessman, and they realized this while he was still studying at the university. Anyway, the business of the couple really did not go very well at first. They constantly had problems, then with the institution itself, then with the management. But gradually they managed to spin. The number of visitors over time increased, and in 2000, when the Petersons decided to sell the institution, it was already considered a fairly well-known and popular place. The couple decided to move to their hometown of Lacy to put down roots and have children. There they bought a small, cozy house in a good neighborhood, bought a car, got a dog, and about a year later, the young woman told her husband the happy news. Soon they will become parents. By that time, Lacy had decided to change her occupation and got a job at a local school as an art teacher. Her husband was having a harder time finding a job and was forced to take a job with a fertilizer and organic fertilizer company. Lacy tried to be an impeccable wife, to create comfort and peace in her and her husband's new home. She kept everything in perfect order, enjoyed cooking, loved to host guests, and had a beautiful flower garden on the lawn. Scott seemed to support his wife in everything, and from the outside they looked like a perfect couple. The news of the upcoming addition to the family he also accepted with joy, and when the couple learned that they will have a boy, they actively began to choose a name for him. The future parents decided to name their son Connor, and everyone was sure that they were looking forward to the arrival of the child into the world. Disappearance of a pregnant teacher. On December 24, 2002, Lacy, who was 8 months pregnant, mysteriously disappeared. The first alarms were raised by Lacy's mother and stepfather, who had been unable to contact her all day. She didn't answer the phone, nor did she return calls, which was unusual for her. As it turned out, the husband was also unaware of his wife's whereabouts. The day before, she had visited her parents and also visited the beauty salon where her sister Amelia worked. She was in good spirits, preparing for Christmas and New Year's Eve celebrations. In the morning, Lacy allegedly went for a walk with the dog, but a couple of hours later, neighbors found the Petersons' dog wandering down the street with a dirty leash dragging behind him. At the time, no one even suspected anything wrong. The neighbor, he said, simply thought the dog had escaped, so he took him to the backyard of the owner's residence. Toward evening, the worried parents called the police and reported him missing, asking them to start searching immediately because Lacy was pregnant, and if she was in trouble, she needed help as soon as possible. But neither that day nor the next, she was never found. A day later, news of the local teacher's disappearance spread throughout the town, and hundreds of volunteers joined the search for her. People combed the area, pasted flyers with portraits of the girl, as well as organized search pages in social networks, where they posted detailed information with the signs of the missing. Mom, stepfather, older brother, and younger sister appealed to all concerned on television with a request to help in the search and share any useful information, for which a reward was even announced, except that Scott behaved somewhat strangely and even suspiciously. He did not take part in press conferences, was not too interested in the results of the search, and did not look particularly concerned. According to the investigator who handled the case, Mr. Peterson's behavior made him suspicious from the start. He was frighteningly calm, and the police officer's questions irritated him. He himself asked no questions, behaved arrogantly, and most interestingly, confused his statements, changing them repeatedly. Scott was the last person to see his spouse on the day of her disappearance. According to him, he went to the golf course in the morning to get some exercise and play, while his wife stayed home and planned to walk the dog and do some cleaning afterward. When he returned home, he found the dog in the backyard, but Lacy was nowhere to be found. Scott did not go to the police because he thought that his wife was visiting her parents. But later, when she still did not show up, he got worried and called his mother-in-law's house, where he was told that Lacy did not come to them. And that's where the first inconsistencies in Scott's testimony came to light. First, no one could confirm his alibi, as he had not been seen on the golf course. Second, the father-in-law claimed, and this was later confirmed by the taped conversations, that he had called Scott himself when he was looking for his stepdaughter, but he replied that he had no idea where she might be. Peterson then quickly changed tactics and stated that he had changed his mind about playing golf, deciding instead to go fishing at a secluded spot in Berkeley Harbor. He attributed the confusion over the phone calls to the fact that all the relatives were on edge and couldn't remember who had called whom or when. During the inspection of the couple's home, a rather strange and frightening detail was discovered: the missing Lacy's purse, which contained her house keys, phone, and some cash. These are things that she certainly wouldn't have left the house without, even going for a walk to the nearest park with her dog. How would she lock the front door? This nuance was alarming and raised suspicions that Lacy hadn't disappeared somewhere on the street, but had vanished from her own home. A grisly discovery. On April 13th, almost 4 months after the pregnant teacher's disappearance, local fishermen noticed something strange on the rocky shores of San Francisco Bay and decided to go closer to examine their find. As it turned out, their attention was drawn to the body of an infant that had been washed ashore. The boy's body had hardly undergone decomposition, but it was badly disfigured, apparently due to the fact that the body had been battered by the waves against the rocks for a long time. His umbilical cord was not cut, but as if torn off. A day later, in another part of the bay, a few kilometers from where the infant was found, the badly decomposed body of a young woman was found. The corpse was so disfigured that it was not immediately recognizable as human remains. But the most gruesome thing was that the body was missing its head and most of each of its limbs. There were only a few fragments of clothing left on the body, including a special maternity bra. It was simply impossible to identify the body, so it was possible to establish that it belonged to the missing teacher only through DNA examination. According to criminalists, the baby was well preserved only because all this time he was in the womb, but in the process of decomposition, the body rejected the fetus. According to eyewitnesses who found the boy, something strange resembling a ribbon or rope was draped around his neck, and there was a large cut on his body. Although the results of the autopsy were never officially published, the experts claimed that the cut was the result of a wave hitting the body against a sharp rock, and that the noose around his neck was just trash. Throughout the investigation and search, Scott remained at large. Moreover, Lacy's parents actively defended their son-in-law for the first few days, calling him an ideal husband and their union a happy one, built on love and trust. But the more the police learned about this guy, the more suspicious he seemed to them. So soon it turned out that Peterson constantly cheated on his wife, and his first extramarital affair occurred almost immediately after the wedding, even before the couple moved to Modesto. Later, he had many more mistresses, to whom he lied about not being married or recently widowed. Thus, in the fall of 2002, Scott met on a blind date with a charming blonde named Amber Frey. The girl worked as a masseuse and raised a young daughter on her own. She was looking for a life partner who would love and accept her along with her child, and handsome, polite Scott she immediately liked. The feelings were mutual. Scott admitted almost immediately that he had recently been widowed, and the coming Christmas would be the first one he would spend without his beloved deceased wife. Amber consoled him as best she could, and from that day forward, they began communicating almost daily. Soon, Scott informed his mistress that they could move in together after the holidays, and the couple began planning a future together. True, Scott noted that he never wanted to have children of his own, and seriously intends to undergo a sterilization procedure, vasectomy, but at the same time, he was ready to raise daughter Amber as his own. All was well until Amber accidentally saw a TV report about the disappearance of a local pregnant teacher. Despite the fact that the husband of the missing woman did not give interviews and did not appear in front of the camera lenses, the broadcast showed pictures of her and Lacy together, in which Amber recognized her lover. Another curious feature was the fact that Scott, soon after the disappearance of his wife, radically changed his image, growing a beard and bleaching his naturally dark hair on his head and face. At first, Amber could not believe her eyes and hoped that she imagined it, but soon she was convinced that she was dating the same guy. She immediately went to the police and told them everything, even agreeing to record their phone conversations. During one of their conversations, Amber wondered why Scott had told her he was a widower a couple weeks before his wife disappeared, but he must have sensed something was wrong, but he was evasive. As soon as the bodies of the dead mother and child were discovered,
the question of immediately arresting Scott as the prime suspect arose. Despite the fact that the investigation had no hard evidence, there was a high probability that Scott would try to leave the country. In fact, that's exactly what he was going to do. But fortunately, he didn't have time. The widower was taken into custody on April 18, 2003, but he categorically refused to admit his guilt. At the same time, his house, garage, and car were searched in detail, with frightening results. Microparticles of Lacy's dried blood were found on tools in the garage, and in the trunk of the car and at the bottom of the fishing boat, experts found several hairs of the dead woman. The clothes Scott was wearing on that fateful day were long since gotten rid of. The house had undergone several general cleanings with the help of cleaning services, and the building itself had already been put up for sale. But the most difficult part of the investigation was the inability to establish the exact date of Lacy's death, which in turn made it impossible to verify the suspect's alibi. The investigation was also hampered by traces of cement found in the garage, in the trunk, and in Peterson's boat. The material was believed to be the basis for a homemade anchor, with which he wanted to dispose of the body so that it would never be found. Although there was no direct evidence against Scott, he was found guilty of 2 counts of first and second-degree murder. Despite the vigorous and rather confident defense of the lawyers, almost no one had any doubts that Scott was guilty. The main proof of this was his behavior. He was not excited or upset. He took no part in the search. He was in a hurry to get rid of the evidence, put his wife's house and car for sale almost immediately after her disappearance, changed his image, and was going to leave the country with his mistress. Investigator Jonathan Buehler, who had been on the case since Lacy's disappearance, said in court that he had no doubts about Peterson's guilt from the start. He realized this after his first conversation with him. The court initially imposed the death penalty as a punishment, but after a series of appeals filed with enviable regularity, the sentence was changed in 2021 to life imprisonment without the right to ever expect to be released. Also, the amount of the insurance, in the amount of $250,000 for the life of Lacy, which was originally assigned in favor of Scott, the court redirected the mother of the deceased. This high-profile case horrified the public and raised the issue of the need to protect unborn children from violence who may become victims of similar crimes. Thus, in the spring of 2004, the Lacy Encounter Act was passed, with the parents and sister of the deceased woman present at the signing. 3 years after the tragedy, Sharon Rocha published a biographical book dedicated to her daughter and grandson titled In Memory of Lacy, A Mother's Story of Love, Loss, and Justice. All money raised from the sale of the publication was donated to charity. The book itself was among the top bestsellers in American nonfiction. Sharon's husband and stepfather Lacy passed away in the spring of 2018 from a heart attack, shortly before another court hearing. He was buried next to his beloved stepdaughter and grandson. By the way, Lacy's own father passed away in December of that same year. Why do terrible things happen to good girls? Because bad boys attract them like moths to a flame. Timed, often naive, they idealize their partner, and they blatantly ignore the glaring red flags. Sometimes these destructive relationships last a long time, and other times, the realization comes quicker. Sooner or later, there comes a choice: leave or continue to get burned, until the moth burns to ashes. The incident that will be discussed entered the history of Austin, Texas, USA as one of the most heinous and, probably, exceedingly didactic. Jennifer was nowhere to be seen. Late on the evening of August 16, 2005, Jennifer Cave, the new girlfriend of Michael Rodriguez, was last in touch. Throughout the night, Michael waited for her call. However, exhausted from work, he unwittingly fell asleep. By morning, there were no missed calls from her. Concerned, Michael remembered Jennifer had promised to call him back once she had dropped off her friend Colton at home. He was uneasy about the fact that she had to go out of her way because Colton didn't arrange his own ride home, and generally he didn't trust Colton and his lifestyle. Meanwhile, Jennifer's roommate, with whom she lived, found Jennifer not at home. Her alarm clock was blaring, but there was no one to turn it off. It seemed Jennifer hadn't spent the night at home. Her friend became worried. They usually informed each other of their plans. She tried calling Jennifer. There was no response. which was uncharacteristic of her. Jennifer has her first day of work today. It's unlikely she would go without changing, the roommate thought. Jennifer's office clothes were neatly hanging on the rack, appearing untouched as if she hadn't taken anything with her. On August 17th at 8:30 a.m., the director of the law firm was notified of the new employee's tardiness. During her internship, Miss Cave had made a positive impression. It was odd that she would allow herself such behavior on her first day of work. By 9 a.m., colleagues called Jennifer, but she didn't answer. Around 11 a.m., the employer sent one of the managers to check on her at home. Persistent knocking went unanswered. They then tried to reach out to the secondary contact number listed on her resume. Sharon Sedgwick, Jennifer's mother, answered the call. She was surprised and seemingly disappointed by the call. She said she would try to locate her daughter. Sharon also couldn't reach Jennifer. Growing worried, suspicion crept into her mind. Apparently she's dropped everything again for that irresponsible young man, she concluded. No one in Jennifer's circle liked her ex-boyfriend, Colton Pitonyak. Despite his intellect and financial status, he always seemed to drag her down. Mrs. Sedgwick called Colton. He said he hadn't seen her daughter for some time. It seemed he wasn't concerned that Jennifer was missing. For some reason, her mother didn't believe him. More than 12 hours passed with no news. After all hospitals in Austin were checked to no avail, Sharon called the police. She reported her daughter missing and expressed concern that she might be in danger at Pitonyak's house. Following the call to law enforcement, Sharon, along with her husband Jim Sedgwick, went to Colton's place to speak with him personally. However, he didn't open the door for them or the responding officers, claiming he had no desire to talk and they had no search warrant. He knew his rights well, so the police had to leave. However, the situation was suspicious. Jennifer's car was found near Pitonyak's house. Although the car was empty, its presence in the parking lot was thought-provoking. It appeared Jennifer was indeed inside the house. Sharon and Jim were certain something had happened to her. The police decided not to waste time and inspected Jennifer's house. However, they found nothing of interest. The only leads were information from Michael and Sharon, as well as Jennifer's car near Colton's house. Michael recounted how Jennifer went out to meet with friends on the evening of August 16th to celebrate getting a job. She had called him several times. Among the friends was her ex-boyfriend Colton, who was with her at the time of the call. During the conversation, Jennifer didn't seem scared or worried, but mentioned that Colton was acting strangely, so she needed to take him home. After that, contact with her was lost. A grisly discovery. All clues led to Pitonyak's residence. While the police were hesitating, Sharon and Jim decided to take matters into their own hands. They drove to Colton's place again. Upon arriving at the apartment complex, they knocked on the door, but no one answered. Sensing something was terribly wrong, the girls' parents decided to call a locksmith to open the lock. However, Jim found a better way. One of the apartment windows was open, and he decided to enter through it. Inside, everything was scattered around. It was clear that no one had maintained order in the house, and the apartment itself resembled more of a den. The man was hit by a putrid smell that immediately triggered his gag reflex. Covering his mouth with his hand, Jim moved toward where the smell was even stronger. The house was empty. Looking into the bathroom, Jennifer's stepfather noticed clutter. Upon closer inspection, he saw a dismembered female body. The head and limbs had been severed. Nearby lay trash bags and a sports bag. Horrified, Jim began to examine their contents. Inside were the remaining parts of the body. The legs of the deceased were covered with freckles, just like his stepdaughter's. However, the corpse was so mutilated that it was impossible to definitively identify who it was. The man hoped, until the last moment, that it was not his stepdaughter. After regaining consciousness, he called the emergency services. Jennifer's life. Jennifer Cave was born in March 1984 near Bishop, Texas. Her family lived in a modest farmhouse. Sharon, her mother, was in her second marriage, which brought 3 more children into the family: Jennifer herself, Lauren, and Clayton. Vanessa, from Sharon's first marriage, was the oldest sibling. Charlie, Jennifer's father, worked as a welder. He was a decent husband and father until alcohol turned him into someone mean and unbearable, hurling insults and causing trouble. When sober, he was calm and respectable. Despite the unstable home environment, the family remained close-knit. Sharon worked as an accountant at a chemical plant, while also taking care of the home and children. Unlike her more sociable brother and sister, Jennifer was shy. While they easily made friends and played outside, she preferred the company of books, which sharpened her intellect and gifted her with an excellent memory. Her passion for reading affected her eyesight, requiring her to wear glasses. Just like the braces in her mouth, the glasses didn't help her self-esteem. Confidence was not characteristic of our heroine, but that didn't stop her from actively participating in school's social and athletic activities. Eventually, her father's destructive habit led to the family's breakup. After the separation, Jennifer and Clayton stayed with Charlie. They supported him with great compassion, trying to prevent his downfall. Jennifer wanted so much to help her father quit drinking that she overlooked his lack of will to fight. 4 years after the divorce, in 1999, Sharon met a new man, Jim Sedgwick, by chance. As Jennifer entered her teenage years, she transformed. She got rid of her braces, and contact lenses replaced her glasses, turning her into a true beauty. However, her character began to change along with her appearance. She started hanging out with kids from troubled families. Yet, thanks to her high intellect, she graduated among the top of her class. Later, Jennifer enrolled in Texas State University, majoring in finance, but quickly became disillusioned with her studies and withdrew after the first semester. She spent some time attending a community college in Austin and worked part-time at a city restaurant to support herself. During this period, she dated a guy named Mark, a decent young man from a respectable family. Their relationship could have led to marriage, but Jennifer got pulled into the nightlife. She began frequenting parties and drinking. Perhaps influenced by her father's genes and negative example, her fondness for alcohol grew. Along with drinking, marijuana entered her life. Sharon tried to influence her daughter, but to no avail. It was during one of these nights out that Jennifer met Colton Pitonyak, the tragic end of Jennifer Cave. Jennifer Cave's life was tragically cut short by a gunshot wound to her right arm. The bullet passed completely through her arm and into her chest, striking her heart. The injury to a vital artery led to rapid blood loss, resulting in her untimely demise. What happened to her body afterward is horrifying. Forensic experts discovered multiple stab wounds across her body, with her chest and neck suffering the most damage. In total, the assailant inflicted 18 post-mortem stab wounds. The perpetrator then decapitated her and fired a shot through her throat into her head, intending to dispose of her body discreetly. By severing her upper limbs, he placed them in a prepared bag and trash bags. Her torso was left in the bathtub, covered with a saw. Something thwarted the assailant's initial plan, forcing a change in his actions. Evidence uncovered. At the time, Jennifer Cave's body was discovered, and the police arrived. They had not yet obtained a warrant to search Colton Pitonyak's apartment. Initially, the officers could do nothing but observe the victim's body and secure the area. Once they finally obtained the necessary permission, a thorough search of the apartment was conducted. They found 3.38 caliber shell casings. The firearm used was located in Pitonyak's car, which was parked in the garage. A large blood-stained machete was retrieved from the dishwasher. Toxicology reports indicated the presence of alcohol, marijuana, and methamphetamine in the victim's bloodstream. In one of the rooms, there was a road atlas with pages torn out, highlighting routes in southwest Texas. This clue shed light on the apartment owner's absence. Colton Pitonyak had fled. Law enforcement immediately issued a warrant for his apprehension. Who is Colton Pitonyak? Colton originated from Bryant, Arkansas. He grew up as a sharp-witted boy with impressive looks, enjoying popularity among girls during his teenage years. His father ran a successful agricultural business that flourished year after year, allowing the family to live comfortably. However, this abundance spoiled Colton. On one hand, he was ambitious and goal-oriented. On the other, he could become aggressive and hot-tempered. Colton was passionate about skateboarding and played the guitar. He attended a Catholic boys' middle school in Little Rock, where he excelled academically and frequently made the honor roll. He was also a National Merit Scholarship finalist. In 2000, Pitonyak was one of 7 senior finalists at his school and among 166 in the state. By his senior year, he began to encounter problems with alcohol and fights, largely because he was part of a group of local affluent kids who led a leisurely lifestyle, often throwing parties with all the ensuing consequences. Nonetheless, thanks to high graduation scores, he easily got admitted to the University of Texas at Austin. Rather than focusing on his studies, he continued his wayward lifestyle, losing friends and gaining a reputation as a frequent drinker and marijuana user. He could have had a bright future if not for his penchant for self-destruction. After being expelled from a university fraternity, he began distributing controlled substances. His parents fought to curb his addiction, even taking him back home. A fateful meeting. In the spring of 2004, Jennifer and Colton met at a party. They were instantly drawn to each other. Jennifer, who often idealizes people, decided to give a potentially dangerous relationship a chance rather than run from it. Their friendship gradually grew into love. Over time, Jennifer began using illegal drugs with Colton. His luxurious apartment gradually turned into a den of excess, and using illegal substances together became a household rule. As a result, Jennifer's addiction only got worse. Parents repeatedly tried to tear her away from these addictions. They even gave her a car, hoping to encourage her to be home more often. However, each time she returned, her promises quickly faded. Colton's condition worsened. He became increasingly paranoid and began carrying a gun and knife in an attempt to mimic the image of a gangster. In 2004, Pitonyak was arrested for possession of illegal substances. He even went through a rehabilitation program once, but Colton showed no sincere desire to fight his addiction. Separation. One day, Jennifer's parents decided to visit her. However, the visit brought disappointment. Jennifer had not kept her promises, had lost a significant amount of weight, and looked generally unwell. Her family suggested she undergo treatment at a rehabilitation center, to which she flatly refused. Upset, Sharon and Jim cut off her financial support, believing this tough love approach would encourage her to take control of her life. But left without money, Jennifer found no better option than to move in with Colton. What happened in his apartment is hard to say, but after living with him for a month, Jennifer decided to leave. A friend offered her a room and support. Miss Cave shared her fears. She no longer felt safe with Colton but did not delve into details. Something clearly frightened her as she refused to reconcile with her ex. One day he came to her, asking her to come back. Jennifer remained firm, especially when she saw the knife Colton brought with him. She asked Colton to calm down and suggested they remain friends. Surprisingly, he agreed. Contact with him was minimized, and moreover, she began reconnecting with her parents. Finally, her life seemed to be getting back on track. In early 2005, Jennifer started a new relationship with a guy named Scott, a single father who appeared quite decent. His lifestyle was the polar opposite of Colton's. Scott worked as a waiter at a restaurant, played keyboards in a band, and was a good singer, all while leading a sober life. In turn, Jennifer began to feel better about herself, even looking healthier by his side. She took on the role of a homemaker and became a mother figure to his daughter. However, she was still liable to leave at a moment's notice if Colton called. The arrival of Laura Hall. Eventually, Colton moved to a new apartment complex with a pool named Orange Tree close to the university, making it a hot spot for daily parties. His behavior continued to be erratic, with some friends reporting they had seen him engaging in Russian roulette by himself. It was during one of these phases that he met Laura Ashley Hall. She was a frequent attendee of these parties and became infatuated with him, exhibiting jealousy towards any female in Colton's circle, especially Jennifer. Laura was perceived in various ways by their peers, most commonly described as arrogant and capable of putting anyone in their place. Laura, like Colton, came from a well-off family. Miss Hall was athletic, participating in various competitions, and she was academically successful, showing great promise. After high school, she enrolled in university but soon dropped out, opting for a job and a leisurely lifestyle instead. Before long, Colton and Laura started dating. Like Jennifer, she was deeply drawn to him. When he was sentenced to 60 days in jail in June 2005, Laura sent him all her earnings, even going into debt. Friends noted that she changed for the worse, becoming bold, neglecting her job and her personal care. Many believed she had also started using banned drugs. Unlike with Jennifer, Colton disregarded her feelings, even to the extent of extinguishing cigarettes on her. A new chapter begins, ends. During this time, Jennifer ended her relationship with Scott. She felt unworthy of his family and did not want to cause them any trouble. Jennifer occasionally communicated with Colton, who was still infatuated with her. However, she did not rekindle their previous relationship, keeping their interactions strictly platonic. All Jennifer desired was to secure a job and return to college. In August, a promising opportunity arose in her life. She began a new relationship with Michael Rodriguez and, most importantly, found an excellent job. After several days of training at a law firm, she performed so impressively that she was offered a consultant position with a respectable salary. Jennifer was proud of herself and truly happy. On August 16th, she decided to celebrate the start of her new life with friends. That evening, they went to a bar and then headed to a club. According to a friend, the bouncer didn't let Colton in because of his appearance. This might have led him to seek out controlled substances. The investigation continues. In an effort to shed light on the events of that fateful night, investigators interviewed Colton's neighbors. They managed to uncover intriguing information. Around 3 a.m. on August 17th, Nora Sullivan heard a knock at her door. Opening it, she saw Colton standing there looking suspicious with blood on him and a pistol visible at his waist. Startled, she inquired what had happened. Colton told her he had gotten into a shootout with some individuals. Nora didn't hear any gunshots and thought he was lying as usual. She closed the door and peeked through the peephole to see him eventually walk away. None of the neighbors interviewed heard any gunshots that night either. Detectives also discovered that Colton had been in contact with Laura twice that night. The morning of August 17th, he visited a hardware store where he purchased a saw, several masks, and gloves, as well as a significant amount of cleaning supplies. Using these, he dismembered Jennifer's body and planned to clean the apartment to erase any evidence of the crime. It's possible that the unexpected arrival of Sharon and Jim startled him and prompted his flight. Apprehension. A critical discovery in Colton's apartment led investigators directly to his trail. Colton, along with Laura Hall, was found in Mexico. They had crossed the border in Laura's car. Local authorities distributed Colton's photo nationwide. During this time, the couple enjoyed themselves, visiting cinemas and restaurants. They stayed in a hotel in the border town of Piedras Negras, where an employee recognized Colton as the sought-after individual. The employee took his photo and sent it to the police. Mexican law enforcement apprehended the duo and transported them to the border, where U.S. officials arrested Pitonyak. Laura Hall was released. Before her release, Laura caused a scene with the Border Patrol, loudly protesting Colton's innocence and obstructing the arrest process. Later, she admitted that their trip to Mexico was the best experience she'd ever had. In total, they spent about 5 days abroad. Trial. On August 23, 2005, Colton Pitonyak was charged with a crime against Jennifer Cave. A month later, Laura Hall was arrested and charged with tampering with evidence and obstruction of justice. The prosecution presented evidence found in the apartment, including a videotape from the store and a receipt listing items purchased. Colton said he did not remember anything about the night of August 16th, 17, attributing his amnesia to heavy drinking and the use of illegal drugs. Initially, he did not deny hurting Jennifer, but insisted he did not remember anything. He claimed that he woke up and discovered his ex-girlfriend's body in the bathroom. After discovering the body, he contacted Laura, who advised him to buy a saw and cleaning supplies. She helped dismember the victim and hide the body parts in bags. The prosecution argued that she was responsible for Jennifer's post-mortem injuries. Colton later hinted that Hall may have been motivated by jealousy, suggesting her involvement in an act of revenge against her rival. However, both defendants pleaded not guilty. Nevertheless, the evidence of his involvement was overwhelming. First, Jennifer's body was found in Colton's apartment. His fingerprints and DNA were found on the machete, saw, and firearm found at the crime scene, and the weapon in his car was identified as the crime weapon. In addition, he was the one who purchased the cleaning supplies from the store. The jury had no doubt of his guilt. On January 29, 2007, Colton Pitonyak was sentenced to 55 years in prison with parole eligibility after serving at least half of his sentence. His earliest release date will not occur until 2060. The case against Laura Hall proved complex. The prosecution suggested she could have acted out of blind affection for Colton. Laura's DNA was found on one of the victim's shoes, a store towel, and even the firearm used. The defense argued this only proved her involvement in disposing of the body, not in the initial act. They couldn't prove she was the one who fired the first shot, attributed to Jennifer's head post-mortem. No evidence placed her at the scene at the time of the crime. Laura insisted she only learned of the crime when Colton told her and claimed he forced her to flee to Mexico with him. However, witnesses from their time in Mexico reported the couple seemed to enjoy their trip. In 2007, Laura Hall was found guilty of obstructing justice and tampering with evidence, receiving a 6-year prison sentence. A subsequent trial in 2010 resulted in the maximum sentence of 11 years and a $14,000 fine. Laura was paroled on March 15, 2018, with GPS monitoring, completing her sentence in August of the same year. Her whereabouts thereafter remain unknown. Was Colton framed? Colton Pitonyak remains incarcerated. He has filed multiple appeals, all of which have been unsuccessful. In these appeals, he consistently stated, but he has no memory of the tragic night's events. However, he revealed that there are witnesses who claim Laura confessed to Jennifer's demise. He alleges that during the trial, the prosecutors were aware of this information but failed to disclose it to his defense team, suggesting a possible setup. Although Pitonyak's legal motions were denied, this revelation raised questions among the public. Moreover, Jennifer's parents believe that Laura's punishment was insufficient. They are convinced that she played a more significant role than she admits. Unlike Colton, Hall has never expressed remorse or regret for Jennifer's death. She referred to Jennifer only as that girl or the dead girl, sometimes even using derogatory terms. To this day, the exact events of that fateful night remain unknown. Only Jennifer knows the truth that the walls of Pitonyak's residence silently conceal. Sadly, the dead cannot speak. Jennifer's life was cut short in her prime. Regrettably, she realized too late an essential truth. Staying away from certain individuals and ceasing communication with them could mean saving oneself. An innocent victim of her spouse's perverse passion. They say that an adult is simply impossible to re-educate because it is a formed personality with its views, way of thinking, preferences, character, and temperament. However, some women are sure that patience and pedagogical talent can work wonders. More experienced women realize that it is important from the very beginning to consider the man who is next to her, to study his shortcomings, and to understand whether she can live together with them, because falling in love and passion will pass, and the negative qualities with age will only worsen. If it is not about some minor shortcomings, but about real problems, such as addictions, pathological tendency to lie and violence and so on, it is better to run away from such a person without looking back. But in women often in such cases manifests the rescuer syndrome, an acute desire and irrepressible desire to help at the cost of their own well-being. It is this syndrome ruined a young British woman named Vicky Roberts, who almost 3 years struggling for her love, trying to re-educate her cheating husband with sadistic tendencies. Unfortunately for the girl, all her efforts turned out only pain, humiliation, and cruelty. Vicky and Michael Roberts. Vicky Roberts, born Victoria Smith, was born in September 1984 in the county of Cheshire, in the northwest of England. She was the younger of 2 daughters in a rather conservative and deeply religious family. Together with her sister, she attended a Christian school and also practiced music and sang in the choir. People around her described her as a very kind, friendly, and helpful girl, always ready to help others. After graduating from high school, Vicky went to university and at the same time got a job in one of the stores of the chain IKEA to pay for her own education. It was there that the girl soon met a young man named Michael Roberts. with whom she first started a friendly relationship. The new acquaintance was only a year older than Vicky. He also got a job at IKEA in parallel with his studies, and he also played sports, carefully watched himself, and was able to make a pleasant impression on others. At first, the sociable and charismatic Michael seemed too talkative and overly intrusive to the modest Vicky, but he quickly managed to gain her attention and favor. It is worth saying a few words about Michael and his family. He was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, and was the eldest of 2 sons in the family of a prominent chemical engineer. Parents brought up their children in strictness, and high expectations always laid on the eldest heir, who studied well at school, grew up ambitious, purposeful, and able to achieve what they wanted. The guy always had a lot of friends. He could easily become the soul of any company, but most of all, he was proud of his victories on the love front. Michael had a bright and attractive appearance, was tall, trim, with a good sense of humor, and the ability to show himself at his best. To everything else, this handsome man was also very intelligent, well-read, could easily support a conversation on any topic. Parents from childhood indoctrinated the eldest heir that he is the best, the most beautiful, intelligent, and will certainly succeed. All this probably provoked in the guy narcissistic disorder, which with age progressed. At the same time, Michael was always very afraid to upset his dad and mom, and therefore did everything to be the perfect son for them, and meet all their expectations. Roberts never had a permanent girlfriend. He regularly changed girlfriends and mistresses, could spin several novels in parallel, so that none of his passions did not realize that she was not the only one. The guy was confident in his irresistibility, could find an approach to any girl, and he really liked to conquer unavailable girls. This process he perceived as a kind of game or competition. Just such a modest and inaccessible girl was Vicky, which Michael decided by all means to conquer. At first, she stubbornly kept her distance and refused even innocent offers to walk after work or drink coffee somewhere. Smith spent almost all her time studying, and on weekends she went to church, so she didn't even think about dating, let alone any relationship. It took Michael a few months for Vicky to finally agree to go out with him. He was sweet, charming, touchingly courted her, gave her flowers, gifts, and little surprises. He even invited her to a family dinner at his parents' house, who liked Vicky very much and immediately approved of their son's choice. Vicky believed he was serious and gave in. He became her first man and remained the only one. She was truly happy around him, and it seemed like fate to her. Michael also seemed to fall in love and was ready to settle down, but it didn't last long. 50 Shades of Michael. From the outside, their romance seemed perfect. They were both young, attractive, full of energy, ambition, and made huge plans for the future. But soon Vicky realized that her chosen one has one peculiarity, namely, an irrepressible sexual appetite and passion for experimentation in bed. At first, he did not put too much pressure on his chosen one in this regard, fearing that Vicky would leave him, but as soon as the guy realized that she would not go anywhere from him, he, as they say, opened the cards. The modest and religious girl was literally shocked by what was happening, but she was head over heels in love with Michael, and therefore trusted him, and for a long time did not tell anyone about what was happening in their bedroom behind closed doors. In addition, her lover made her an official marriage proposal, which she gladly accepted, sincerely believing that after the wedding everything will change and the chosen one will stop his experiments. Soon, one of Vicky's closest friends began to notice that she carefully disguises and hides bruises and small bruises under her clothes. She brought Smith into a frank conversation and asked if her fiancé was beating her and if she needed help. Vicky tried to deny everything, but then still admitted that all these marks are the consequences of intimate experiments Michael, who had a special passion for binding, the use of various toys and devices. She also secretly told her friend that they have with the chosen intimacy happens up to 5 times a day, while he still remains hungry and unsatisfied. Michael considered himself a skillful lover, and intimacy for him was a kind of art and a way of self-expression. Sometimes he made concessions when Vicky refused to participate in some completely crazy and even dangerous experiments, but in most cases, he still managed to persuade the girl in love with him, unplanned pregnancy. After defending her diploma, Vicky decided to change jobs and was soon hired as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also quit IKEA and got a job as a sales consultant in one of the stores of a large retail chain, selling phones, laptops, and other electronics. He almost immediately became one of the best employees because thanks to his charisma, communication, and persuasive skills, he always exceeded sales targets. Soon, the new young employee was promoted to senior salesman, and the management seriously considered his transfer to the main office. But before that, he had to undergo training and improve his qualifications. Michael enjoyed attending training sessions, going on business trips to London, and was very proud of himself. He seemed to have forgotten all about his young fiancée and only remembered when he needed intimacy. They didn't talk about each other. They hardly ever went anywhere together, and outside the bedroom, Vicky seemed to cease to exist for him. At the same time, he began to have affairs on the side with colleagues, clients, and just casual acquaintances. Michael was literally obsessed and addicted to intimacy, and intimacy with different women, and constant new victories on the personal front were an important part of maintaining his self-esteem. At this time, Vicky discovered that she was pregnant and happily broke the news to her fiancé. They had already delayed the wedding, and it seemed to the girl that now Michael would hurry things up. But the news that he was going to be a father only made Michael angry and mad. He immediately began to insist that the child should be gotten rid of because they are still so young and they have their whole life ahead of them, and with offspring can wait. Vicky was shocked by such words, but flatly refused to terminate the pregnancy. Then the groom decided to press her in another way. Michael began to convince the bride that such news will cause anger in her religious parents, because their youngest favorite daughter lived with a man and got pregnant without being married. However, according to him, the termination of pregnancy will be hidden from everyone, and after the wedding, they will certainly have children. For Vicky, it was a difficult decision, but her chosen one had a real gift of persuasion, so that a few days later she gave in to persuasion and went to the hospital. Unfortunately, it was not without complications. Vicky for a few days stayed in the hospital, and then it took her almost 3 weeks to recover her health. For all this period, the doctor categorically forbade her to have an intimate life, and Michael, learning about it, went into a rage. Then Vicky finally realized that he had mental problems and a real addiction to sexual contacts. Beloved literally went crazy without intimacy and began to leave the house every day, explaining it with urgent matters at work. Vicky guessed that he was looking for intimacy on the side, but sincerely hoped that everything would change once they got married and she would help him get rid of this addiction, a loveless marriage and an adult mistress. The engagement lasted almost 2 years, and the man, apparently, did not even intend to marry the chosen one, because the current state of affairs suited him quite well. He had a fiancée who faithfully waited for him at home and fully served him in the household, and numerous mistresses on the side which he regularly changed. Vicky always took him at his word, and even if she found out about his cheating, she always forgave him, as long as he promised that it was the last time and he would not do it again. But time passed. Vicky began to insist on marriage, as she wanted a full-fledged family and children. Also, this question was increasingly raised by her parents, but most importantly, the wedding was insisted on by Michael's parents, whom he really did not want to upset. Modest and sweet Vicky, they liked them very much, and they considered her a great couple for their son, and were constantly interested in when they will get married and make them happy with grandchildren. Not without the help of their parents, the couple organized a lavish wedding with a white dress, limousine, and a beautiful away ceremony. The newlyweds looked in love and happy. It seemed that they had a long life ahead of them. But hardly any of the relatives guessed about the dark side of the man, with which his young chosen one was already so well acquainted. The newlyweds settled in a large and cozy house in the prestigious area of Warrington, not far from Roberts's parents. Michael did not love his spouse, however. Marriage made him normal in the eyes of relatives and others. Vicky never complained to anyone about his strange predilections and constant cheating, and he could continue to change mistresses like gloves. At work, he was quite successful, got another promotion, and was making good money. After being transferred to a new office, Michael's direct boss was a certain Carrie Hall, the head of administration at Phones 4U. She was 10 years older than him, had been divorced for a long time, and was raising a son on her own. At the same time, Carrie was quite attractive, well-groomed, and, as her position required, determined and strong-willed. For a long time, she did not pay any attention to the signs of attention that she was given by a young subordinate. However, for the guy it became a kind of signal to action. He sought to achieve this woman, connecting all his natural charm and eloquence, and after about a month, Carrie reciprocated. Lovers began to meet regularly in hotel rooms, and their relationship the woman later described as turbulent, passionate, and full of experimentation. Carrie was a mature, self-confident woman. She was undoubtedly flattered by the attention of such a young man, and she was also not opposed to trying something new.
So Michael could realize with her those fantasies, which did not dare his modest wife. He constantly lied to his wife about being late at work, attending corporate trainings and the like, and told his mistress how unhappy he was in marriage, that this union was a mistake of youth, and said that he was ready to divorce, but his wife does not give him a divorce. This relationship with Carrie lasted more than a year, but since the woman had no illusions about Michael, she did not insist on divorce, and she was quite satisfied with their meetings in hotels, marks on the body and dangerous games. After the beginning of relations with Michael, Carrie began to give preference to buried clothes with long sleeves and high throat, which was unusual for her. The woman was actively engaged in sports, and always liked to show others her stunning figure. And here suddenly, completely changed her style. Once Hall admitted to her close friend that her lover loves to experiment in intimate terms, and sometimes these experiments go beyond reason. As evidence, she showed a bite mark on her chest, which Michael left in a fit of passion. Also on her neck there were blue marks from squeezing by his hands, and on her wrists there were marks from the ropes, with which the boyfriend liked to tie her so that she was completely in his power. The friend was horrified and suggested that Carrie go to the police, but she refused, noting that all this was consensual, and in most cases, he warns her about what he is going to do, but the process itself can get out of control. For example, Michael loved to strangle his partner, convincing her that it would increase the pleasant sensations of the process. But a couple of times he was so much carried away that she lost consciousness. Vicky was very afraid of such games with strangulation, but every time she succumbed to her husband's persuasions and believed that one day he would get tired of it. He would leave his cruel and painful experiments, or she would get used to it and would perceive them as something ordinary. Unfortunately, neither his wife nor any of his mistresses even tried to stop Michael. Open correspondence and a love letter. Vicky had guessed about her chosen one's affairs on the side, even before they were married. She, most likely, even realized that he was addicted to it, but sincerely believed that something was about to change, and her love and care can turn daring and loving Michael into an exemplary family man. But after the wedding, the situation only worsened, and the young husband himself denied his cheating, and he did it very convincingly. Vicky decided to conduct her own personal investigation and looked into her husband's phone while he was sleeping. There she found numerous correspondence Michael with Carrie and several other girls, which he did not even bother to delete. Their content was quite intimate, moreover. With some girls, the guy exchanged explicit photos. This came as a shock to Vicky. She packed her things and decided to move in with her friend for a while. She did not tell her parents and sister anything about what was happening, afraid to upset them. So her family was sure that Vicky was happily married. Besides, religious relatives would have insisted on a divorce when they learned of her husband's infidelity. But after all, Vicky was in love and didn't want to break up with her husband. Leaving, she wrote Michael a touching letter in which she confessed her love for him and called the main man in her life. At the same time, she admitted that she knows about his cheating and does not want to put up with it and therefore leaves, but gives him time to think about it and will not yet file for divorce. She wrote it all by hand on paper and left it on the refrigerator with a magnet. Michael was not touched by the message or saddened by the departure of his wife, but he did not want to lose a quiet and submissive woman who always waited for him at home, fully served in the household, and tolerated any of his antics as well as peculiar predilections. That same evening, he followed Vicky to her friend's house, picking up a large bouquet of flowers on the way. Michael on his knees apologized and begged her to return to him, promising that from now on she would be his only woman. Vicky once again believed, or rather she wanted to believe, and returned to their home, a new mistress.
Naturally, Michael did not leave Carrie and continued to meet with other women, but for a while he was extremely careful and even tried to come home for dinner, which his wife carefully prepared. He hid his phone, deleted correspondence, and even changed the password from his social networking page. At that time, he began to have an affair with a new young female employee of the company, Karen Wilson, not stopping the relationship with Carrie. At that time, the girl had a fiancé, and she was preparing for the wedding, but Michael began to persistently pursue her, making himself a miserable lover. He was so attracted to the new object of the hunt that after 2 months, he decided to break off the relationship with 33-year-old Carrie Hall, which he was tired of. The man told Karen a proven legend about how he is unhappy in marriage, and for the sake of her ready to leave his wife. Soon she surrendered, and between them happened intimacy right in the office, and a week after that she broke off the engagement and waited for the lover to respond. However, Michael was not going to divorce, but also to interrupt the connection with a new mistress he did not want, and therefore just lied to her that he had already filed for divorce and moved to live in the house of his parents. Fatal blackmail. Vicky soon suspected that her spouse continued to cheat on her, and this time decided to act for sure. She took Michael's phone while he was in the shower, but could not find anything there, because he had taken into account his previous mistakes and deleted all text messages, and on the page in the social network now had a different password. Then Vicky waited until her husband fell asleep and took his work laptop, which he always carried with him, and on which, as it turned out, he did not leave his account in the social network. There, Vicky found correspondences with an already new girlfriend, in which her husband confessed his love to her, claimed that he was divorcing his wife and living with his parents. It was a real shock for her. She took screenshots of the love and intimate messages exchanged between the couple and saved them on her laptop so that she could have proof of her husband's infidelity. Vicky also looked in her husband's wallet, where she found several folded checks for hotel rooms. In the morning, she presented all this to her spouse, and for the first time in their entire time together, she gave him a scandal. Michael was discouraged. He tried to apologize again and promised that it would not happen again, but Vicky suddenly said that she would tell his parents about everything, hoping that they would be able to talk some sense into him, since she could not do it. Michael was literally mad from such threats. He did not want his parents to know anything, and slapped his wife. Then Vicky got up and said that she would go to them immediately, and then headed for the door. Her spouse caught up with her, hit her twice in the head with a heavy jewelry box he grabbed from the dressing table, and after she lost consciousness, he squeezed her throat with his hands until she stopped breathing. The man felt no pity or remorse. He wrapped the body in a blanket and packed it into several large garbage bags, and then carried the gruesome bundle into his garage. Michael then quickly cleaned up the house, packed and removed most of his wife's belongings, and immediately called Karen, whom he invited over. They had dinner, had fun in the house, where a couple of hours ago Roberts killed his own wife, and then made love in the bedroom, where, in fact, everything happened. Ran off with her lover? The very next day, Michael informed his parents that his wife left him, having run away with another man. To do this, he personally went to their home and literally sobbed on his mother's shoulder, showing her messages from his wife, which he himself sent from Vicky's phone. The messages said that she had fallen out of love with him, met another man, and decided to live with him. Parents, as they could, consoled their son, and sincerely bewildered how their sweet, kind, and religious daughter-in-law could do such a thing. In parallel with the phone of the deceased, Michael sent messages and her parents, which said that she fell in love with another, left with him, and asked for now not to bother her, and give time. Naturally, the couple Smith immediately rushed to call their daughter to find out everything and hear her explanations, but the calls were constantly rejected, and in response only came messages asking to give her time. This seemed very strange to Vicky's parents, and they went to Michael's house to talk to him, but his story only raised more questions and doubts. And after they found out that Vicky was not showing up for work without saying anything to anyone, they decided to go to the police. An investigation, a gruesome discovery, and an escape. On the 1st of December 2009, Michael bought a shovel, several meters of rope, as well as rags and detergents from a hardware store. However, he did not manage to get rid of the body, because on the same day the police visited him at home. Then the police could not find anything suspicious, but Michael's behavior and story raised a lot of questions and doubts. However, the strangest thing was that they did not pay attention to the huge package in the corner of the garage during the inspection. In the house, there were no clothes, documents, and personal belongings of the missing woman, which could indicate that she had left. But Vicky's laptop was in the bedroom, and the police seized it for inspection. There, they found screenshots of Michael's correspondence with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved, and then decided to make a geolocation request to Vicky's cell phone, from which regularly came messages to her husband and relatives. And then it turned out that the phone had been in her and Michael's marital home all along. After that, law enforcers again visited the house of Roberts and conducted a more thorough search, finally unwrapping a strange package in the garage. The find shocked everyone present, but then it was discovered that Michael, who had been walking with the police all this time, disappeared somewhere right under their noses. He took with him a wallet with cash, so that several days he managed to hide without giving himself away. Arrest, trial, and conviction. When the money ran out, Michael came to one of his mistresses, whose name was Lavinia Talley, and asked to live in her house for a while. In the evening, the girl heard from the news that her lover was wanted on charges of murdering his wife, and immediately, without hesitation, reported to the police about his whereabouts. At the time of his arrest, Michael was crying and said he was innocent of anything. The man insisted that his spouse died during their intimate games when she asked to strangle her with a rope belt, and he overdid it. However, forensic experts found that firstly, the woman was strangled with her bare hands, secondly, she was attacked from the back, and thirdly, there are 2 extensive hematomas on her head received during her lifetime, which can definitely have nothing to do with intimate relations. The trial of the perpetrator began in January 2010. The defendant kept insisting that his wife's death was the result of an accident and hoped for leniency. However, the autopsy results presented by experts proved that the man in cold blood hit his wife twice on the head and then strangled her and hid the body in the garage. Michael Roberts was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. However, the court left him the possibility of applying for parole after 17 years in prison. That is, the criminal has a good chance of being released in 2027. Many years ago, scientists believed that religion would soon disappear and people would live in a benign, rational world. But religion has not disappeared. Moreover, the majority of the world's population remains religious to this day. Kurds are an Indo-European ethnic group, the 4th largest nation in the Middle East, and the largest nation in the region without a state of its own. The vast majority of Kurds are Muslims. Religion sets a person certain rules of behavior, makes them sacred, so people are afraid to break them. But today, we will learn the story of one family, where the rules of religion were distorted in favor of their own immoral beliefs. On January 26, 2006, a young man, Rahmat Suleimani, went to the police station and reported his beloved girlfriend Banaz missing. The man became concerned about her welfare after he had been unable to contact her for a week. The police did not take the missing report seriously as the man had no family ties with the missing woman, but they were forced to check the information and go to the address of residence. When the police visited the missing woman's home, they found nothing to confirm Rahmat's words about the disappearance. Her parents behaved calmly, and did not express any obvious concern as if their daughter was really missing. Moreover, the family claimed that Banaz had not been home much lately and insisted that she was not missing, but had probably left and was probably at a friend's house. The police were satisfied with this explanation, but Rahmat persisted, harassing the police with daily visits to the station and forcing them to take search measures. He would not give up. The man was desperately searching for his beloved Banaz. Banaz Mahmod was born on December 16, 1985, in Iraq. They were a traditional Iraqi Kurdish family with strict religious beliefs. They lived in the rural tribal area of Kaladiza in Iraqi Kurdistan. Mahmoud Babakir Mahmud and his wife Beya had a son Bahman and 5 daughters, Beza, Behal, Hayman, Jaband, and Banaz. It was a typical Iraqi family with strong views on the role of women. In 1995, when Banaz was 10 years old, her family fled to the UK. The move had no impact on the family's views. Remaining deeply religious and traditionally influenced, the Mahmoud Sr. were not about to change their way of life, even in a liberated European country. They shunned modern notions and views and lived in their religious community. Following the traditions of the community, at the age of 17, Banaz was forcibly married to a man who was 10 years older. He had flown in from Iraq shortly before the wedding, spoke no English at all, and lacked even basic literacy. She had met her future husband only 3 times before the wedding, once on her father's property. A girl with brown eyes, long dark hair, and a kind smile, she submitted to tradition and moved into the home of a strange, alien, and cruel man. From the first day as Banaz crossed the threshold of her new home, her husband set about raising her. Moral abuse, beatings, and physical violence became a daily occurrence in the girl's life. Banaz, who had lived half her life in the UK and had seen how modern people live, did not want to put up with cruelty and tyranny in her family. She made attempts to leave her husband many times, returning to her father's house, but her family forced her to return. Despite the disgusting attitude, divorce was out of the question, as it was considered a disgrace for the entire Mahmod family. Unable to find support from her relatives, Banaz went to the police twice, but even there, she was virtually abandoned to the mercy of fate, without even bothering to question her husband about his wife's injuries. In July 2005, after 2 agonizing years of marriage, Banaz ran away from her tyrant husband's house and returned to her parents' home. This was the first link in the chain of events that led to Banaz Mahmod's disappearance. After her separation from her husband, Banaz felt as if she was breathing again. She met a man named Rahmat Soleimani. The bright, pretty 19-year-old girl fell in love with the man. Rahmat was charmed by Banaz's beauty and modesty. They liked each other very much, but had to keep the beginning of their relationship a secret. Having exchanged telephone numbers, the lovers allowed themselves to correspond only twice a day, early in the morning and late in the evening. Rahmat was different from the men in Banaz's entourage. Calm, judicious, and polite, Rahmat treated the girl very reverently and tenderly and won her heart at once. Within a short time, the couple was already dreaming of a wedding and a happy family life. They even came up with names for their future children. These fantasies filled Banaz with happiness and kept her afloat, not allowing her to break under the pressure of hatred and aggression, which was spewed at her by her family, who never accepted the departure of her husband. In early October 2005, while walking down the street, Banaz noticed the same car following her and someone following her. From their appearance, she realized that they were Kurdish diaspora people assigned by her father. The girl, who knew the foundations of her family, became very scared for her safety. On October 10, 2005, Banaz went to the police again. During a 2-hour interview, she told the detective on duty in detail about her life with her husband, the injuries she had received from him, her family's resentment, and the surveillance that had begun. She shared with local police that she had been repeatedly beaten by her tyrant husband, and during one of the assaults, she nearly had a tooth knocked out because she publicly called her husband by his first name. She brought to the attention of the police several times that she seriously feared for her safety and even her life. But unfortunately, Banaz's statement went into the back of the desk, and detectives didn't even bother to interview her family and husband and verify the accuracy of the information. Again, Banaz's statement is not taken properly. She promises to contact the police again if she feels she is in danger. For about 2 months, Banaz and Rahmat met secretly and went undetected. But in early December 2005, when they met near a London subway station, they were spotted by people from the clan. Information about another disgrace was immediately reported to the girl's father. That same evening, a council consisting of all male relatives gathered at the Mahmod family home. During a heated discussion of Banaz's actions, which they considered inappropriate, her uncle Ari Mahmod announced that to restore the family's honor, Banaz should be killed. She overheard this conversation. In December 2005, Banaz went to the police again and detailed that she had been under surveillance for months and that the day before she had learned that they wanted to take her life. She made a list of 5 members of her own family who were to carry out the massacre, but the law enforcers again did not take her words seriously. Soon it turns out that it was a big mistake, the consequence of which will be the disappearance of Banaz. And to learn about her fate, detectives will have to wade through a web of lies, cruelty, and ignorance. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father tricks her into going to a relative's house, promising to discuss her divorce. When she arrived, Bubakir Mahmod made her drink brandy and left her alone in a room with the TV on. Casually turning around, she sees her father putting on rubber gloves and reaching for a rope. Realizing that she was about to be taken out of her life, Banaz rushed to the front door, but the door was locked. In order to get out, she had to break a window, the shards of which cut her hands. The girl managed to get to a nearby cafe where she fainted. The paramedics who arrived at the scene took her to the hospital where they called the police. When Banaz regained consciousness, she called Rahmat and asked him to come. After being discharged from the hospital, Banaz went to live with Rahmat Suleimani. They welcomed the beginning of 2006 together and were quite happy, but by mid-January, the Mahmod family furiously began urging Banaz to return home to mend their relationship with her and discuss her marriage to Rahmat. Banaz believed her mom and dad and agreed to go back to her father's house. She believed that in case her father attacked her, her mother would protect her from harm. As insurance, Banaz visited the police station again, writing a full statement and the names of people who might harm her. The young woman was fearful, but still returned to her family and parents' home. On January 22, 2006, in the street, 3 men attempted to grab Rahmat and force him into a car. Suleimani was able to fight back and report the incident to the police. 2 days later, he and Banaz were to appear at the station to testify, but Banaz never showed up. All attempts by Rahmat to contact her were unsuccessful, as Banaz Mahmod disappeared after returning to her parents' house. Rahmat, who had been in constant contact with her, was very worried and filed a missing persons report with the police. Numerous appeals to the police eventually bore fruit. The case of Banaz Mahmod's disappearance came to the attention of the Homicide and Serious Crime Directorate, and Chief Inspector Caroline Good was appointed to lead the investigation. The first version of the disappearance was that Banaz was being held in a house in the diaspora. To search for the woman, Inspector Caroline Good organized a large-scale search of properties associated with the Mahmod family. The suspects, Banaz's father and uncle, as well as her ex-husband, were called in for questioning. Searches have begun for 3 other men on the list Banaz provided to police in December 2005: Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ham. All of them were Banaz's cousins. When police searched the forest and tried to question her family, doors were slammed in their faces and the family was unable to help investigate her disappearance. Police found no pictures of her at the family home, and according to Caroline Good, officers were outraged by the complete indifference from her family. Then 30 people came to the attention of Caroline Good. All of them were arrested and interrogated, During searches from the persons involved in the case, were seized more than 20 vehicles and 300 cell phones. Absolutely all those questioned tried in one way or another to slow down the investigation, giving completely contradictory testimony about Banaz's whereabouts. Some lied about seeing her after her disappearance. Others, including Banaz's mother, simply refused to talk to the police, and some claimed she was a fugitive. Realizing that none of them would cooperate voluntarily, Caroline Good obtained permission to install listening devices in the cell of those arrested. At the time, Banaz's father and uncle, as well as Mohammed Hama, remained behind bars. The other 2 men on the list managed to flee to Iraq. When the detectives received the first results of the wiretap, they were horrified. Not only did all 3 arrested men have no regrets, they literally savored the details of Banaz's death. From their conversations, it became clear that in the early morning hours of January 23rd, the Mahmod family deliberately left their home, letting Ali, Hussein, and Hama inside. There they attacked Banaz and subjected her to beatings and violence for 2 hours. At the end of the torture, Hama tightened a cord around her neck and strangled her. As he recounted the last moments of Banaz's life, Hama could not contain his laughter. But it was the accusation of her cousin, Mohammed Hama, after he admitted to being there when Ramat was threatened, that became the turning point. While Hama was held in cells awaiting trial, his phone conversations were secretly recorded. Caroline Good, with a new dose of horror, listened to the recordings, in which the suspect proudly described the details of the massacre of a relative. They congratulated each other on how courageous they were. Hama shared in detail what they had done to Banaz.
She was vomiting and scared but didn't utter a sound. He then wrapped the rope around her neck 3 times so tightly that it burrowed under the young woman's skin. He excitedly continued to speak as he placed his feet on her back and pulled and tugged on the rope. Banaz clung to life until her last breath. It took the criminals more than half an hour for her to die. Caroline Good and the detectives who had seen much could not hold back tears as they realized the horror that innocent Banaz had endured. At the time of Banaz's abuse, her cousin, 30-year-old Dana Amin, was in the house and helped the perpetrators push Banaz's body into a suitcase. Ari Mahmoud dragged him out of the house to a waiting auto nearby. Hama added that a police car drove by, but its crew did not pay attention to the suitcase, which had hair and an elbow sticking out of it. The very people who were supposed to protect her from harm plotted her murder, strangled her with a shoelace, stuffed her body into a suitcase. The perpetrators then took the gruesome luggage outside London, with scraps of conversation mentioning a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good matched the information she received with the movement data of the arrestees' phones and determined the search area. Given the vastness of the area, the work could take a long time, but to help the investigation again came to the aid of the criminals themselves, who turned out to be quite talkative and literally reveled in the act of retribution. During the conversation, one of them suddenly asked the accomplices if they had put the freezer back in its place. Now Good knew exactly what she had to look for. A police helicopter was dispatched to search, and while repeatedly circling the area, it spotted a house whose backyard was littered with a pile of trash. Among the black garbage bags, a white oblong object that looked very much like a freezer stood out as a bright spot. A close inspection of the suspicious house on the ground confirmed the hunch. Setting aside the heavy equipment, the police officers began digging. In shifts they dug, but when the depth of the hole reached their shoulders, the policemen were ready to give up. All except Caroline Good. She clearly remembered the words of Mohammed Hama, who had cheerfully expressed in front of relatives that he had buried her so deep that they would only be able to find her with the help of an informer. The inspector convinced everyone to extend the search for one more day, and late in the evening of April 28, 2006, the suitcase was found. Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, so only dental records and DNA samples could be used to identify her. Her body, folded into a fetal position and hidden in a suitcase, was buried under a freezer in the garden of a house in Birmingham. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were charged. They were all convinced that they had done exactly the right thing and showed no remorse. Mohammed Hama smugly declared that the case would never go to trial because he was carrying out an act of retaliation. Caroline Good did have to face a new wave of opposition organized by the Kurdish diaspora. After the discovery of Banaz's remains, the police received a flood of those wishing to provide the criminals with alibis, all of whom claimed that on the day of the alleged death of the woman, the suspects were in public and could not have committed such a crime. In total, the case involved 50 people involved in one way or another in Banaz's death. Caroline Good later recalled those events this way: "I felt nothing but anger, disgust, and contempt for these men. 50 men had actually participated in the murder of one woman, and they were proud of their masculinity." In early March 2007, London's Central Criminal Court began hearing cases against Boubakir Mahmoud, Ari Mahmoud, and Mohammed Ham. Prosecutor Victor Temple, during the trial, described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution that was ordered by the victim's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury unanimously found all 3 guilty of the charges and not deserving of leniency. The father was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years, the uncle received life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years, and cousin Mohammed Hama also received life imprisonment, but with a minimum term of 17 years. Delivering the verdict, Judge Brian Barker said, "In order to restore your so-called family honor, you have decided that she must die and her memory must be erased. This is a barbaric and heartless crime. What honor is there in a father putting his status in society above the life of his own flesh and blood?" But what could these words mean to the ruthless criminals who had long carefully planned to rid themselves of the fictitious disgrace? 4 months after the trio's conviction, the London police were notified that Muhammad Ali had been arrested for a crime against a boy in Iraq. He had taken his life. The leadership of Scotland Yard had to make a lot of efforts for his extradition because previously Iraq never agreed to such measures and did not extradite its citizens. But the British managed to get their way, and in June 2009, Ali was extradited to the United Kingdom. Omar Hussein, the last of the 5 perpetrators, was hiding in the Iraqi countryside, trying not to be seen by the public. In December 2009, during an argument with one of his brothers, he was shot in the leg and had to seek medical attention. He was arrested at the hospital by the police who were called, and after his discharge, they began preparing him for extradition. Initially, Hussein claimed that he had not been in London in 2005, and therefore he could not be involved in Banaz's death. However, this was contradicted by UK Social Security records, according to which he was receiving refugee benefits at the time without delay. In March 2010, Hussein was extradited. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. Dana Amin, who was in the house at the time of Banaz's murder, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for helping to dispose of the victim's body and obstructing justice. Banaz's recorded interview at the police station at one of her addresses proved her family's guilt. She once handed over a letter to a South London police station in which she gave the names of men she said were ready to kill her and her boyfriend Rahmat, with whom she had been seen kissing. The people she refers to and names were members of her family and the wider Iraqi Kurdish community, enraged by Banaz's decision to divorce a man who acted as if she was a dirty shoe to be worn whenever they wanted. She tried to leave him several times, but returned to try again, at the insistence of her family. The indifference of the police in this case, which cost the life of a young woman, has led to a significant change in the way such honor cases are handled today. Following the death of Banaz Mahmod, an inquiry into police misconduct was launched. An independent commission prosecuted 9 police officers for their inadequate response to allegations made by Banaz. 7 of them received reprimands and 2 were dismissed. Worth highlighting in this case is the tenacious team of Caroline Good, who was able not only to find Banaz's body, but also to secure the conviction of her father and uncle and to bring back the escaped criminals from Iraq. Unfortunately, this would not bring the marvelous Banaz back to life, nor would it change the fact that the people on Earth who were the worst for her were her relatives, who by basic instinct should be her most important protectors. Banaz was buried in the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service for Banaz was held on June 26, 2007 at the Morden Auditorium, followed by a granite memorial headstone at her grave. Her family did not attend either service. Few people, including Ramat Suleimani, Caroline Good, and Banaz's two sisters, came to honor the memory of the unfortunate woman. The memorial was paid for by law enforcement officials working on the Banaz case and the women's rights organization.
Ramat Suleimani, who remained in the UK under the Witness Protection Program, never recovered from the death of Banaz. He wrote a letter of condolence to his deceased beloved, telling her that she was the love of his life. No, she was just the whole world to him. In May 2016, 10 years after the crime, he hanged himself. This marked his third attempt to end his life. There is little evidence of the extent of the problem with the police, as the law is not required to record honor crimes. The Association for the Protection of Women's Rights in Iran and Kurdistan reported that police recorded more than 2,800 cases of honor-based violence in 2010. However, an organization set up to support victims of honor crimes and forced marriages said that more than half of the 600 calls they received each month, though unattended due to insufficient evidence. The UN estimates there were 5,000 honor killings worldwide in 2000, the worst form of censure against women who are perceived to have dishonored a family or community. While most cases are in South Asia or the Middle East, and in predominantly Muslim communities, cases such as that of 19-year-old Banaz Mahmod have highlighted tensions in immigrant communities trying to adjust to changing lifestyles. Some groups suggest that thousands of honor crimes go unnoticed in minority communities in Britain. Hundreds more women are taken abroad where they are forced into marriage or seriously harmed when their changed outlook on life puts them in conflict with their traditional male communities. Banaz Mahmod Bakabir Aga, a young woman of Kurdish descent, died on January 23, 2006, for the honor of her family. Her older sister, Bahal, urged other women in the same situation as her and her sister not to be afraid to seek help before it was too late. Even today, she continues to fear for her life, lives at a secret address, and never goes outside without a long black veil that covers her entire body and face except for her eyes. After all, even running away or living a secret life takes place in constant fear of being found, and from Banaz's story, it is obvious that there simply could not be a happy ending. Oriental women probably absorb submission and dependence on men with their mother's milk, accepting their will over and over again, whatever it may be. The Metropolitan Police team responsible for the investigation and for finding Banaz's body and filing a case against those involved in her murder has won an award for their work in detective investigation. Chief Inspector Carolyn Good was awarded the Royal Police Medal for her work in leading the investigation. The videotape, which had long gone unnoticed by the public for 7 years, has become crucial evidence for investigators after warnings about the dangers faced by the young woman went largely unheeded. A camera set up in the corner of a police interrogation room captured the young woman's nervousness as she brushes her hair away from her face and begins to tell her grim story. Banaz Mahmod quietly and in detail describes the violence and oppression at the hands of her abusive husband. She tells of intimidation by men on the street whom she recognizes. Then, finally, she warns of her impending death because of the dishonor she has brought upon her family. "Until now, they follow me," Miss Mahmod says in ragged English with a strong Iraqi accent, for she has lived in the Kurdish region of northern Iraq. "This is the main reason I came to the police station. In the future, at any time, if something happens to me, it will be them." Then the camera turns off, the lights go out, and total darkness sets in.
A crime of honor committed by close relatives. A crime of honor is a severe criminal act. typically, but not necessarily, committed against a female family member as punishment for bringing disgrace and dishonor upon the family. The offenses punishable by death at the hands of relatives can vary across different countries and cultures, but often include marital infidelity and apostasy. Each year, according to official statistics, around 5,000 such crimes occur worldwide. However, various women's rights organizations claim this number is at least 4 times underreported. What is most alarming is that often the perpetrators face no punishment, and their actions are deemed righteous. Police in countries where such crimes are prevalent simply turn a blind eye to these acts, and although it is claimed that in recent years the penalties for such actions have been intensified, there are no official data to substantiate this. Sami Shahid's case in 2016 shocked the world. She was forcibly married off to a cousin she openly despised and sent to her ancestral homeland. However, she soon broke off this imposed union to marry for love, against her relatives' wishes, and paid the ultimate price for it. Her story drew intense public scrutiny as she was a British citizen of Pakistani descent. Yet she met her tragic end in Pakistan, where the case was quickly suppressed, attempting to frame it as an unfortunate accident. The Shahid family story. Chaudhry Mohammed Shahid and Banaz Shahid emigrated to the UK in the mid-1980s from a small Pakistani village named Pandori, located in the Jhelum district of Punjab province. They moved to a foreign land in search of a better life to escape the poverty they lived in back home. In November 1987, their eldest daughter Sami was born in the English city of Bradford, located in West Yorkshire, and a few years later, her younger sister Mita was born. The head of the family established his own business renting cars, which later focused on renting luxury vehicles, including high-end limousines. As his business prospered, he helped 2 of his brothers and their families also move from Pakistan and settle in the UK. The relatives also opened and successfully developed their businesses. One brother had his own seafood shop chain by the early 2000s, and the other opened a flower delivery and floristry company. Overall, the Shahid family was quite well known and successful in Bradford, being quite wealthy and influential. Sisters Sami and Mita were born and raised in the UK, but their family strictly adhered to the laws and traditions of their ancestral country, so the girls grew up under the influence of a mix of European and Pakistani cultures and customs. The liberal English views and manners starkly contrasted with the strict orders of their ancestors' country. For example, the girls were not allowed to drive a car, and all their contacts and movements were strictly monitored by their father. The elder daughter, Sami, was the apple of Chaudhry Mohammed's eye and was considered daddy's girl. He indulged her in every way, buying her expensive outfits and jewelry, and paid for her education at one of the most prestigious universities. She meticulously cared for her appearance, used cosmetics from well-known brands, visited beauty salons, and spent extravagant amounts of money there. Meanwhile, she worked part-time at a post office, essentially supported by her father who paid for all her whims and desires. Frequently, Sami, without her family knowing, would rent a car and drive herself. She loved driving, felt confident behind the wheel, and did not understand why Pakistani traditions forbade women from doing so. She was headstrong and freedom-loving, but she tried not to upset her parents, doing everything as they said. Shahid had many friends from school and university in England with whom she kept in touch. She was characterized as a bright, kind, and cheerful person. Forced marriage. Despite living a life filled with love and abundance and seemingly having everything she wanted, the woman was deprived of the opportunity to make any decisions independently. She constantly lived with an eye towards her parents' and elder family members' opinions, from whom she needed constant approval for her actions. More than anything, Sami feared upsetting her father, whom she adored. However, numerous prohibitions, fears, and strict orders meant she was never truly honest with her family. In 2012, her parents decided it was time for their eldest daughter to settle down, get married, start her own family, and have children. They insisted that she go to Pakistan and enter into a marriage in accordance with all the rules and cultural traditions. They chose her cousin, Chowdhury Mohammed Shakil, whom she barely knew, as her groom. It's worth noting that marriages between relatives and arranged marriages are quite common, although not a strict requirement in Sunni Islam, but the tradition is honored to this day. Sami knew that sooner or later her parents would choose a husband for her and present it as a fait accompli, leaving her with no choice in the matter. She was prepared for this, understanding the inevitability of such a marriage, but her father's choice was truly shocking to her. Shakil was openly distasteful to her, even causing her some repulsion. Additionally, he had recently been released from prison where he served time for ending someone's life over a land dispute. Since childhood, Sami occasionally interacted with Shakil as if he were a brother, but she could never imagine him as her spouse. Notably, her own parents were also cousins whose marriage was arranged by relatives, but they managed to genuinely fall in love and build a happy family. Her parents believed that their daughter would experience the same fate and that she and Chowdhury would eventually fall in love. Despite her aversion to the groom, Sami could not disobey her father and understood how important this was to her family. However, her mother and younger sister Mita later claimed that no one forced her into the marriage, and given her complex and headstrong character, it would have been impossible to do so physically or morally. She married voluntarily, without any coercion. In early February 2012, the decision about the upcoming wedding was finalized at a family council. The following couple of weeks, her parents and aunt and uncle, future in-laws, took the bride shopping, where she chose everything she liked, and they paid for expensive outfits, jewelry, accessories, cosmetics, and so on. Sami was denied nothing, but it all seemed as if she was being purchased. Likely that was indeed the case. The bride pretended to be caught up in the wedding preparations, but inwardly she felt like a hostage. She already understood that this marriage would not bring her happiness, but would be a real punishment. However, she could only discuss this with her friends, not her family. At home, she needed to appear happy, discuss the details of the upcoming celebration, and prepare for her departure to Pakistan. On February 20th, 2012, the young woman boarded a plane and while in the cabin, sent a message to a close friend saying she was flying thousands of miles to make the biggest mistake of her life, but she had no choice. Later, she sent several more messages in which she confessed that the mere sight of the groom made her nauseous, and she could not stand to be near him. On February 27th, a lavish wedding was held for Sami and Chowdhury in Pandori, attended by about 1,000 people. The celebration lasted 4 days, and as a wedding gift, her parents presented the newlyweds with their own luxurious 2-story house, located next to their family home in the same province of Pandori. However, the young woman understood that this rich and beautiful house would become a real prison for her, where she would be forced to live with a man she did not love. Return to the United Kingdom. Family life, predictably, did not bring Sami happiness. She still detested her now lawful husband and realized she could neither love this man nor even grow accustomed to him. But 4 months later, in mid-June 2012, the young woman returned to her native Bradford to sort out some issues and help her husband with the immigration documents for obtaining British citizenship. She was supposed to apply for a spousal visa for Shakil, but she was in no hurry with this, enjoying the illusion of freedom and the opportunity to not see her unloved husband for some time. When Sami finally started processing the documents, she learned that their wedding ceremony, conducted according to all the canons of Sharia, was just a marriage contract between Muslims, but had no legal force in the United Kingdom. To recognize such a marriage, certain measures under European laws were necessary, namely conducting a civil ceremony and obtaining an official document, a marriage certificate. Friends of Sami noticed changes in her character and behavior after returning from Pakistan. The young woman appeared sad. Her eyes seemed extinguished. She was no longer the joyful and sociable person she used to be, and she clearly harbored deep resentment towards her parents. Any conversations or mentions of her husband and family life provoked irritation and anger in her. The issue was that Shakil was very jealous and tormented his wife, even from another country. He constantly called her, and could demand at any time that she video chat with him. This was how the man controlled where his wife was, what she was doing, and who was with her. Moreover, this was, in a way, a demonstration of the husband's superiority and his power over the woman. In early August of the same year, during a phone conversation with a close friend, Sami confessed that her nerves were giving out. She was completely drained and no longer wanted to live because she had lost any joy, hope for happiness, and a bright future. She said she detested Chaudhry with all her soul and never wanted to see him again. However, she could not say this to her relatives. They only went around telling everyone about the luxurious wedding they had arranged for their eldest daughter. The very man. In early September, without having resolved the issues with the spousal visa, Sami was forced to return to Pakistan to her unloved husband. She regularly wrote to friends about how miserable she was, how much she hated her marriage, and how she felt trapped with no way out. This continued for several months, but then she began to complain less frequently, and her mood changed. During her next visit to the United Kingdom, it became clear what had caused this change. It turned out that she had met a young man online, Syed Mukhtar Kazim, who, like her, was a British citizen of Pakistani origin. He was born and raised in London but had been working and living in the United Arab Emirates for the last few years. The pair started corresponding and quickly developed romantic feelings. They secretly arranged a meeting, and in October 2013, they saw each other in person for the first time. Sami immediately realized that Syed was the man of her dreams, with whom she wanted to spend the rest of her life. He was kind, caring, attentive, and courted her beautifully. They had a lot in common, but they both understood how dangerous and risky their relationship was. Nevertheless, life only seemed meaningful to the young people when they were together. She openly told her beloved about the situation she was in and said she was ready to end her marriage to start anew with Syed. However, she could not get a divorce through a British court because, according to local law, she was not married at all. Divorce and new marriage. In the spring of 2014, Shahid decided to speak with Shakil and asked him for a divorce, but he rudely refused, stating that she would belong to him until the end of her days. Then, during another visit to the United Kingdom to her parents, she secretly contacted a local Islamic Sharia council, reporting that she had been forced into marriage, which was a valid basis for annulling the marriage. She also converted from Sunni to the Shiite branch of Islam, which her new lover belonged to. The cleric contacted the woman's husband to hear his side regarding their marriage, but he again rudely refused to discuss his personal life, stating that he would not give permission for a divorce. After that, the Islamic Sharia Council of the United Kingdom dissolved the marriage, recognizing that Shahid had been coerced into it by family pressure. Sami's family members had no idea that she had divorced her husband in absentia and was preparing to remarry, now to the man she loved. In September 2014, the young woman secretly married her new chosen one. This time, the union had legal force, and the spouses received a certificate of registration of their relationship, confirming its legality. The same cleric who had granted permission to dissolve the bride's previous marriage conducted the Nikah religious ceremony. Only a few close friends of the newlyweds, who were present at their wedding, knew about this event. The couple was truly happy. Sami confessed to her friends that she felt like a princess in a fairy tale and couldn't believe that all this was happening in reality. However, this joyous and happy event was the beginning of a real nightmare: family dispute and escape from the country. When Shakil demanded that his wife return to Pakistan, she responded that she no longer belonged to him and presented a certificate of her new marriage. This infuriated the man, who immediately called his father-in-law to inform him of the situation, sparking a severe scandal. The family attempted to coerce her to return to her husband with threats, but she refused, which soon led to severe consequences. A few weeks later, Sami was brutally assaulted on the street while shopping with her sister. Notably, her sister was unharmed, but Sami nearly had her legs broken with metal bars. The police took her statement but failed to find the men responsible for the assault, and the case was quickly dismissed. At this time, Syed had to fly to Dubai for work, leaving his wife in the United Kingdom awaiting a visa to follow him. The wait became a real torment for her, filled with endless threats, disputes with relatives, and fear for her life. Moreover, her parents tried to prove that their daughter's divorce from Shakil was invalid, and even caused a scene with the cleric who had married the lovers. Sami's mother was furious, insulting her daughter and saying that she had disgraced their family and would suffer terrible retribution. In the spring of 2015, Sami finally received her visa and was able to fly to her husband in Dubai. It felt more like an escape, as the young woman feared her family would do everything possible to keep her and forcibly return her to Pakistan. For several months, she kept her passport with friends who also bought her a plane ticket and accompanied her to the airport, a new life. The following year was the happiest in Sami's life. She enjoyed her freedom and the ability to make her own decisions, living with the man she loved, who adored her and was ready to carry her on his hands. Additionally, she could drive a car, something her parents and former husband would never have allowed her to do. In photos posted on social media, Sami was radiantly happy. She blossomed, looked more beautiful, and it was clear she had achieved what she had always dreamed of. Shahid wanted to become a mother as soon as possible, but sadly, this happiness was not meant to be for her. Nonetheless, she and her husband confidently looked to the future, making plans for their lives, unaware that her closest relatives had already condemned her. Immediately after their daughter's departure, her parents filed a missing persons report with the police, which they later wanted to reclassify as an abduction, accusing Kazim of the crime. The Shahid family members started devising a plan to force the young woman to return by any means necessary, considering various options. Threats no longer worked on her, but they could play on her sympathy. A sinister trap. In June 2016, Sami's parents conveyed tragic news. Her aunt, Shakil's mother, had passed away. Sami was devastated and even considered flying to Pakistan for the funeral, but she was aware of the risks involved. Many family members still hadn't accepted that she had left her unloved husband and remarried. Her actions were viewed as betrayal and disgrace. A week after the aunt's funeral, her mother called again, reporting that her father's health had severely deteriorated. He had diabetes, and his condition had recently become unstable. If he passed away, Sami knew she would never forgive herself if she didn't visit him. Despite her concerns and her husband's attempts to dissuade her, she decided to travel to Pandori. Fearing for her life and safety, she promised her husband to keep in constant contact with him. On July 14, 2016, Shahid arrived in Pakistan and first went to a close friend's house. She left her passport and return ticket to Dubai with her friend, shared her fears, noted her bad premonition, and asked her friend to pray for her safe return to Syed. The following few days passed relatively peacefully. She stayed in touch with her husband and friend, updating them on her movements. She visited her aunt's grave with her family and met with many relatives. She was scheduled to fly back to Dubai on July 21st. However, on July 20th, Sami suddenly stopped making contact. Tragic news. On July 20th, 2016, Chaudhry Mohammed Shahid called the police station to report the tragic death of his daughter. When law enforcement arrived at the house where Sami had lived with her first husband, they found her lifeless body at the bottom of the stairs. Unfortunately, it was too late to help her. There were several visible bruises on her body, which, according to her parents, she sustained from falling down the stairs, and a small amount of pinkish foam was found coming out of her mouth. According to her father, Sami likely had a heart problem, fell, and rolled down the stairs. Since no one was home at the time, she was not assisted promptly, and she passed away. When asked about the whereabouts of the deceased's husband, Chaudhry stated that he had gone out on business. The police found no signs of foul play at the scene and did not open a criminal case, leaving the final determination to the forensic experts. An autopsy was conducted on the same day, yet the pathologist found no signs of violence, and the conclusion was that her death was due to natural causes. She was buried within a few hours of her death. Sami's sudden demise was not considered suspicious and raised no questions, except from her grieving husband. When Kazim was informed of his wife's sudden death from a heart attack, he couldn't believe it. Moreover, the press called the young woman's death a voluntary departure from life due to depression over her inability to have children. However, this version was contested by Shahid's relatives, who claimed she lost consciousness on the stairs and broke her neck while falling. Investigation and the grim truth. Syed Muhtar flew to Pandori on the first available flight and went straight to the police station to report that his wife was deprived of her life by her relatives and former husband. He described the forced marriage and her escape, as well as threats from her family. This information fundamentally changed the case. The authorities recognized it as an honor crime, but the body had already been buried, and the official report stated that Shahid died of natural causes. However, as the deceased was a British citizen, Kazim sought to involve European law enforcement and the media in the investigation. Initially, Sami's father agreed to an interview and tried to portray Syed Muhtar as an imposter and extortionist. However, after the young man produced their marriage certificate, as well as a hard-won copy of the medical report and post-mortem photos of the deceased, an investigation was initiated. The report noted bruises on the deceased's neck and legs and traces of male seminal fluid on her body, indicating that she had intimate relations shortly before her demise. But with whom, if Shakil was supposedly not at home that day? Kazim held a press conference, presenting all the evidence he had, including text, voice, and video messages from Sami, in which she repeatedly expressed fear for her life. Suspicions arose that the police had been bribed, and the deceased's father and former husband were immediately detained. It turned out they had no intention of letting the young woman return to Dubai. They forcibly brought her to the house given as a wedding gift, where they searched all her belongings for the passport and ticket, which, as mentioned, she had left with a friend. A furious Shakil, with his father-in-law's tacit approval, physically subdued the young woman, and after she tried to escape, the men caught up with her on the stairs. While the former husband strangled Sami with her scarf, the father held her legs, leaving her no chance of survival. This account was confessed at the station by the perpetrator himself, although Chaudhry Mohammed denied any involvement in the act against his own daughter. Legal proceedings and the fate of the participants. Besides the father and former husband, the deceased's uncle, who had acquired a forged report before the autopsy, and the commissioner who conducted the initial investigation, were also detained. In court, Shakil recanted his confession, claiming it was made under duress. He spent just over 2 years behind bars but was released on bail in September 2018. In 2019, the man remarried and again attempted to relocate to the United Kingdom, which was unsuccessful. The father of the deceased was in prison from July to December 2016 and was also released on bail. He passed away in January 2018 at the age of 52 due to exacerbated health problems, never admitting guilt or involvement in his daughter's demise. The deceased's uncle and the commissioner were also released in the fall of 2016 without facing any consequences. Soon after, arrest warrants were issued in Pakistan for Mita and Banaz Shahid, but the mother and sister of the deceased promptly returned to Bradford. Mita later gave a substantial interview in which she attempted to discredit Sami and her second husband, blaming them for the downfall of the once happy Shahid family. Truth is something that exists in reality and corresponds to the real state of affairs, but sometimes it is difficult to accept the truth, and a person creates a lie, which sincerely begins to believe and convince others. 11 young men and 1 girl met in a hotel room to celebrate the new year. Strange collaboration, you will think, and you will be right. But wait. There is one fact that will completely change your opinion. The men at this party are all members of a sexual minority, which means that 12 friends just met to have fun and celebrate the year 2021. And indeed, they celebrated the new year very cheerfully, so much so that on January 1st, the company had to take the only girl to the hospital, where doctors declared her death. But who was she? How did she die, and was anyone charged in connection with her death? But that's all in order. Next, let's break down the past party almost minute by minute, see what happened on the fateful night, and you'll definitely understand why we started this story with the notion of truth. So on December 31st, 2020, in Manila, the capital of the Philippines, at the 4-star City Garden Grand Hotel, John Paul de Lucerne checked in at 11 a.m. Christine Dasera checked in later, and during the day, 9 other guys checked into room 2207 and room 2209, which were on the same floor. Hotel manager John Paul Khalili joined the merry company just after midnight. New Year's Eve night was all about fun, dancing and alcohol, lots of alcohol. Rommel Galita woke up around 10 a.m. and noticed Christine sleeping in the bathtub. He covered her with a blanket and went back to sleep. When he woke up several hours later, he found her unconscious and beginning to turn blue. Christine was taken to the hospital by 3 friends and hotel staff, but upon arrival at the emergency room, doctors only pronounced her dead. The 11 guys with the only girl spent the entire night in the hotel room, and she was dead by morning. News headlines about the crime shocked the public. Everyone imagined the story the same way, because it was obvious what a group of young guys and 1 girl could do all night. But what really happened that New Year's Eve night, and from what Christine Dasera died, was to be solved by the investigation. Christine Angelica Dasera was born on April 13, 1997, into the well-to-do family of John Nestor Dasera and Sharon Rose Faba Dasera, and grew up in Barangay San Isidro, General Santos City. She grew up an outgoing, intelligent, and independent girl. Kristen was a loving sister to her 3 siblings, Monica, Chloe, and JJ. After graduating from high school, she moved to the larger and more promising city of Davao, on the shores of the bay of the same name. There she enrolled in university. Christine studied diligently, danced, modeled, and was active on social media. Christine was also the epitome of beauty and intelligence. In 2017, she graduated with honors from the University of the Philippines Mindanao in Davao City, where she earned a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Arts with a major in Media Arts. The girl has been actively involved in modeling and theatrical performances. On August 5, 2017, she competed against 8 other contenders for the title of Miss Silva Davao 2017 at the New City Commercial Corporation Mall in Davao City. She came in 2nd place. In June 2018, she participated in the annual fashion show. From September 2017 to January 2019, she worked as a marketing consultant for Gaisano Malls in different parts of Mindanao, including Davao City, General Santos City, Tagum, Toril, and Digos. Christine's life has been colorful and fulfilling. In February 2019, her life's dream came true. She moved to Manila to start working as a flight attendant for PAL Express, a subsidiary of Philippine Airlines. Christine Dasera's last flight as a flight attendant was on December 28, 2020. Christine's death was immediately publicized, due to which numerous discussions and theories were formed in the community. Initially, the police suspected that Kristen was most likely abused and killed by a group of guys she was partying with on New Year's Eve. Even without autopsy results and a toxicology report, Makati City Police filed preliminary charges of assault and murder against 11 men. The Philippine National Police declared the case closed. Arrests were made with charges and identification of suspects. 3 of the party participants were detained after surrendering to authorities on their own. But the main answer to what really caused Christine's death was the forensic medical report. The autopsy of Christine's body was conducted in Pasay City at the Rizal Funeral Home under the direction of Forensic Medical Officer Police Major Michael Nick Sartiento. On January 3, 2021, the examination of Christine Dasser's body was completed, and a forensic report was issued which found that death was due to natural causes due to a ruptured aortic aneurysm. However, it also mentioned bruises on the girl's right arm, right thigh, knees, ankles, and right foot, as well as a linear abrasion on her right thigh. Deeply healed lacerations and abrasions were also reported during the genital exam. The National Capital Region Police Department announced that a special investigation team had been set up to look into the case, but Christine's family was unwilling to accept the fact that a young, vibrant girl could die a natural death prematurely. At a press conference on January 5, 2021, Christine Dasser's family stated that they had seen the autopsy report that said she died of an aneurysm. However, they stated that the autopsy performed was incomplete and requested a second autopsy. The parents of the deceased have been trying to understand how Christine's aorta was ruptured. After all, the police and the Dasera family lawyer believed that the aneurysm was the result of assault or abuse, which means it was not a natural death, and the perpetrators should be punished. The prosecutor's office identified all of the 11 men who were with Christine throughout the night. Some of them were her co-workers. Other young men were friends of her friends whom Christine was meeting for the first time. It turned out that Christine was the initiator of this party. She had booked the hotel room herself a few days in advance and coordinated this party with her friends. Her mom, Sharon, was aware of her daughter's friendship with men and never opposed it. Since childhood, Kristen had found it easier to socialize and make friends with the male gender, so it was considered normal in their family. In addition, she and her friends usually did not go home for vacations, so it became a tradition for them to meet each other every year. Kristen was able to call her family just after midnight to inform them of the ongoing celebration at the Makati Hotel and to wish her family a happy new year. During the video call, the family could see Kristen's friends and the surrounding festive environment. However, there has been new speculation about the abuse allegation, so in the case, the main evidence of the incident became the frames of the video from the hotel lobby, the study of which helped the police almost minute by minute to reconstruct the picture of what happened. It should be noted that the party was to be held in room 2209. It was this room and booked Christine Dasera. The main events begin to unfold in the late afternoon. At 11:21 p.m., Christine leaves room 2209 and goes to room 2207. At 11:38 p.m., the company returns to their room. Christine goes last. She is holding her shoes in a glass. At 2:50 a.m., Christine, holding the hand of a new acquaintance, Valentine, goes to room 2207. While they are at a neighbor's house, a hotel employee brings an extra mattress to room 2209. At 2:52 a.m., Valentine accompanies Christine to her room. Valentine's gait shows that the girl is already quite drunk. Her gait is too relaxed, and she is holding a bottle in her hand. The friends stop at the door, and Christine suddenly kisses Valentine, but the man quickly pulls away, after which the couple goes inside. At 3:15 a.m., Christine hurriedly leaves her room and goes to her neighbor's room, and 6 minutes later, one of the guys leaves there. He heads to room 2209, presumably to call his friends. At 3:22 a.m., Christine Dasera can be seen chatting with another man in the next room on the right side of the hallway, while 2 other men walk past them. She looked upset. Suddenly, Christine hugs one of her friends, and then they disappear from the view of the cameras altogether. At 4:13 a.m., John de Lucerne can be seen carrying Christine back to the first room. At 4:22 a.m., the camera again captures Christine at the door of room 2207. It's unclear what brought her there again. She practically falls off her feet, and a guy who looks like John de Lucerne picks her up by the waist and carries her to room 2209. Christine looks pretty drunk. At 5:05 a.m., the camera captures Christine laughing as she runs away from a guy who looks like Louis de Lima. Afterward, they're standing outside room 2207. Christine looks normal, and with him she enters room 2209. At 6:23 a.m., Christine makes her last appearance on camera alive. For the last time, Valentine carries her in his arms from room 2207. The girl is conscious. It was obviously an eventful night, But the most important truth still remains behind the scenes. The party continued until dawn. Around 12 noon, when Christine was found unconscious in the bathtub, her friends carried her to the floor and repeatedly attempted cardiopulmonary resuscitation. After unsuccessful attempts, they called for help at the front desk. A few minutes later, the hotel manager and the head of security arrived in the room. They used a wheelchair to lower Christine to the first floor of the hotel. Rommel Galido accompanied Christine to the hospital. The doctors unfortunately only stated the girl's death. Rommel called Christine's mom and broke the bad news. It can be assumed that what is happening really looks like a fun party, and definitely to be in one room such a large company was cramped, so young people chaotically moved all night from room to room. But the investigators had suspicions about the use of illegal substances to enhance the effect of alcohol. When questioned, some of the detainees claimed that there were no illegal substances during the party, but only whiskey and tequila. It is worth noting that illegal drugs were initially the centerpiece of the investigation, as the testimony of one of the detainees reported that Christine had doubts about the contents of the drinks and suggested that someone may have spiked it with an unknown substance. It transpired that guests were asked to bring their own food and drinks. Because of this, there was speculation that Christine Dasera's drink was poisoned and could have triggered the aneurysm that eventually led to her death. But the autopsy report stated that no alcohol or illegal drugs taken the night before her death would cause this type of aortic dilatation or defect. Substance information was later unconfirmed, as no illegal substances or traces of them were found in the room or in the suspect's personal belongings. An examination and search of the two rooms, as well as the neighboring room 2009, looking for potential evidence, did not yield the desired results that at least indirectly proved the violent death of Christine Dasera. Under questioning, Mark Rosales and John de la Serna publicly admitted their unconventional orientation and stated that Christine was their best friend and they would never hurt her. John also revealed that they had to bring Christine back from room 2207 because she was already vomiting early in the morning. Rommel Galido said that around 10 a.m. he found Christine in the bathtub of their room and thought she was asleep, so he just covered her with a blanket. However, around noon, after he woke up and went back to wake her up, he realized the girl was blue and not breathing. He rushed to his friends for help. The hotel advised that she be rushed to Makati Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead on arrival, reportedly due to a ruptured aortic aneurysm. The hospital reported the death to the Makati City Police. Meanwhile, other men from a neighboring hotel room had left by then. On January 4th, the Philippine National Police sent a separate statement to the media about the Christine Dasera incident, saying that the case is almost solved despite some missing details and conflicting reports on the matter. Police Chief Debold Sinas said they already have 3 suspects, and they have been apprehended. Other suspects were being sought. But as early as January 6th, the Makati City Prosecutor's Office ordered the release of the 3 men who were in custody due to lack of evidence. Prosecutors insisted that the evidence presented was insufficient to establish that Christine was abused. They also said that even if Christine Dasera was abused, the police have yet to prove that this is what caused her death. Moreover, the party was a gathering of men of non-traditional orientation where they were all flirting with each other, and Christine was an extra woman. Rommel Galido, as well as most of those present at the party, were stewards and co-workers of Christine Dasera at PL Airlines, indicating that she was well acquainted with these men and their orientation. On January 13, 2021, the Makati City Prosecutor's Office launched a preliminary investigation and based on an official autopsy that confirmed that the 23-year-old died from a ruptured aortic aneurysm. The prosecutor's office also called on the police to release the results of the victim's DNA analysis, toxicology report, and histopathic study. However, Christine's mother, Sharon Dasera, criticized the report that her daughter was not abused. She appeared on a news show where she claimed that her daughter was abused by a group of guys. If you see Christine's body, if you're a mother, You'll probably feel the pain that Christine suffered because of them, but my daughter can't talk anymore because she's dead." The woman spoke out on the TV program. Sharon cited the lacerations and bruises on her daughter's body, which were not recorded in the autopsy, as evidence that the report was inaccurate. Christine's family later said they wanted another autopsy to challenge authorities' initial findings that she died a natural death. The basis was injuries and bruising that were not documented in the first report. Family spokesperson Brick Reyes said that the injuries on the victim's legs and arms, as well as her remains, would provide sufficient evidence that Christine was abused. Brick Reyes also said that they believe the young woman was drugged and abused before she died. Christine was already intoxicated and complained that something seemed to have been spiked in her drink during the New Year's Eve celebration. Christine's parents said they have filed a complaint demanding the immediate dismissal of Michael Nick Sarmiento for gross negligence and gross incompetence in preparing Christine's forensic report and death certificate. Dr. Marisi Ramos, a friend of Dasera's family, told reporters that the body was subjected to a second autopsy. He also emphasized that the biological fluids recovered from the second autopsy have been forwarded to the Death Investigation Unit, which will provide more details after a final evaluation and consolidation of all the findings of its forensic team. The pathology autopsy results from the Southern Police District Crime Lab Division's forensic report, which was eventually shared on social media, showed that the cause of death was consistent with what was previously reported as a ruptured aortic aneurysm. The official autopsy revealed that Christina was not abused on the night of her death. The actual cause of Dasera's death lies in the aorta. The constant increase in blood pressure in the aorta caused the defect to weaken, and eventually the aorta ruptured, the Philippine National Police Crime Lab report said. At the time the aorta rupture occurred, there was blood loss, so Christine felt various symptoms such as weakness, nausea, and sweating. The blood loss due to the aortic rupture killed her within a few hours, the report said. This means that the girl had a ruptured aortic aneurysm, which enlarged the lower part of the main vessel, aorta, that supplies blood to the entire body. This vessel runs from a person's heart through the chest and abdomen. Since the aorta is the largest vessel in the body, if it ruptures, a person can lose a huge amount of blood and potentially be fatal, as in this case. In addition, it was noted that Christine's aneurysm did not occur recently. It started a long time ago. The report states that dilatation is a chronic condition and was present long before her death. Had she not died that fateful night, she would still have died in any scenario that would cause her blood pressure to rise enough to rupture the aneurysm. The autopsy also revealed that Dasera's heart was enlarged compared to a healthy heart, further confirming Christina Dasera's undiagnosed hypertension. For the most part, it can be confirmed that the girl's death was due to natural causes. But the widespread misinformation brought shame and persecution to those 11 young guys who were at the party and sincerely tried to give Christine first aid, but they were labeled as criminals. All 11 guys who were charged preliminarily have since been released from custody. The Makati City Prosecutor's Office tried to rectify the situation and said that at the time of the publicity, the evidence presented was not enough to establish that Christine Dasera was abused, and it was impossible to obtain proper evidence at that time. Therefore, they had to build a version based on signs of deterioration of the victim's body. In addition, 2 other suspects said that the police forced them to give false testimony that there were illegal drugs at the New Year's Eve party. Another participant in the story explained his kiss with Christine, which was captured by surveillance cameras on the eve of her death. According to the man, it was Christine herself who initiated it. He, however, tried to push her away. Law enforcement officials were criticized for not conducting a thorough toxicological examination when the flight attendant's body was found. The charges against the men were later dropped due to lack of evidence. The death of Christine Dasera attracted widespread media attention as a result of suspicious circumstances that seemed to contradict the findings of the Philippine National Police. Christine's case continued to receive a lot of publicity online as further developments came from her family, who in no way could accept the truth and believe in the natural death of their daughter. The girl's mother, Sharon, appealed to President Rodrigo Duterte for help in seeking justice for her daughter. "I am an ordinary person. You also have a daughter. I want to speak out openly because I don't want anyone to be victimized by the kind of cruelty and barbarism like my Christine." Christine Dasera was buried at Forest Lake Memorial Park in her hometown of General Santos, more than a week after her death. A wave of condolences, reposts, and farewells traveled across the social stanzas of Kristen's friends and co-workers. Ultimately, the unconventional case of Christine Dasera serves as a prime example of when the media spreads misinformation and how it can affect the public as well as impact those involved. As we come to the end, the story wants to return to the truth, which sooner or later, but in any form, is bound to take its place of honor. After all, the truth is one. But Christine's family is still convinced that the girl was killed by these people and that there is something secret in this story. Personally, I do not understand and found no answers to the question about bruises and wounds on Christine's body. Why was it hushed up? It seems that despite the presence of wounds and bruises on Christine's body, the cause of her death was not them, but the rupture of the aorta due to heart disease, so they did not focus on the wounds on her body. In my opinion, there are a lot of oddities and inconsistencies in this case, but you guys are the judge. I would like to wish Christine's family to accept the irreparable loss, because young guys, whether they are guilty or not, will end up remembering the same sad story every New Year's Eve and making excuses for the rest of their lives.
No one knows what awaits him or her behind the next turn of fate. We naively plan our lives, dreaming that we will enter a prestigious university, and after graduation, we will get a high-paying job. Later, we will meet a worthy life partner, create a strong family with him, provide our children with a better future, and die in a deep old age in the circle of relatives and friends. This is probably everyone's dream. The success of some only spurs us on, gives us an incentive to live better. But what if things go differently than we expected? As we grow up, we take off our rose-colored glasses, and the clod of adult problems grows every year. It is only how we deal with it that shapes us as a person. From Angela Stolt's memoir on her website, I was born in Bangkok, Thailand, into a military family. My parents raised me with love and respect. I was disciplined but never abused by them. The woman was born in 1972. At the time of the events, she was just over 40 years old. Due to her father's work, the family often had to move around without staying in one place for long periods of time. As soon as the girl got used to the new school and had time to make friends, another move was planned. Angela lived in constant worry and anxiety. The woman's poor health also contributed to her hardships. Angela had been diagnosed with a thyroid disease, for which she had to take maintenance medication for the rest of her life. The disease depressed her mental and emotional state. However, Angela wanted to live and love like all other people. Gradually, her family settled in Georgia. Angela went to high school, where she still had difficulty adjusting. To fit in, she began to socialize with the first company that accepted her. Unfortunately, they were kids from dysfunctional families. There, she met a guy who was 3 years older than Angela and was already in his first year of college. After a year of studying, Angela made the decision to drop out of school and live with a young man. When I was 15 years old and living in Georgia, I married a very abusive man who kept me away from my parents. In addition to being treated like a prisoner, I was regularly punched and choked. Twice, as I recall, he used CPR to bring me to consciousness after choking me. I had broken ribs, a dislocated jaw, numerous bruises. My voice box was damaged and my windpipe was crushed. After 5 years of torment, I found a way to escape from him. At that time, I was diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorder, and depression. I started taking antidepressants. After the breakup, Angela married a second time fairly quickly. Once again, she found herself trapped with another dominant man. At that point, she was in her early 20s. In 1996, a son was born to the couple, and all would have been nothing. except that the man was not known for his mild temper and also beat the young woman. This exacerbated my symptoms of PTSD, anxiety disorder, and depression. At this time, I started taking a highly addictive drug, Angela recalls. The former lovers eventually broke up and the baby's father disappeared. Angela was left alone with the baby in her arms. Since she never finished school, Angela had few jobs and no profession, and having a baby in her arms made it difficult to find a job. All she could think of in this situation was to find a man to take responsibility for both of them. Around the age of 25, she remarried. From her third marriage, 2 more children were born, a boy and a girl. Despite her health condition and unstable psyche, the woman cherished her family and brought up her children. However, time was ruthless, and for this marriage. In 2011, the man left the family. Later, Angela also claimed that her former spouse was no different from the previous ones. He was a manipulator and a toxic man. According to her, this is what caused the breakup. Now Angela was left alone with 3 children. One thing was good. The older children could already provide for themselves, but Angela had no other stable income except for social payments from the state. She had enough for a modest life, but she wanted to live better. Money decides everything. Probably everyone has heard this expression many times. They are an indicator of prosperity and wealth of a person. They serve as a kind of criterion of his mental abilities, luck, and judgment. However, not everyone knows how to earn them. Some are simply not given. Someone prefers to sit and do nothing while waiting for receipts from outside. Someone does something, even trying, but gets a little, and maybe wrongly disposing of them. There is another category of people who love money and wait for it, the so-called lovers of easy money. But sooner or later there comes a moment when you have to pay the bills. In 2007, Angela and her family moved to Florida, a suburb of Daytona Beach, and settled near a young couple with children. They turned out to be James Schaefer and Candy Medina. The families quickly became friends with each other. The young people supported Angela in difficult times and often visited each other. On April 2nd, 2013, James said goodbye to Candy as he was going to his next appointment. She was sleeping sweetly in her bed with her children. That night, Candy saw her lover for the last time. Missing persons flyers described James as being about 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighing about 275 pounds. He had brown eyes, brown hair. Distinguishing features included several tattoos, one that read Gringo on his neck, a Metallica skull on his right calf, and NCC on his right forearm. The last time he was seen, he was wearing work clothes that consisted of a black shirt, black pants, and black shoes, the standard dress code for a limousine driver. James Schaefer was born in 1976 and grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, USA. He had a fairly large and close-knit family. He grew up together with his brother and sister, whose names were Christian and Andrew. The guy was fond of sports since childhood, highlighting baseball the most. After graduating from high school, together with his girlfriend Candy went in search of a better life, in Florida. The couple was in a relationship for a long time, had 4 children. There was a relaxed atmosphere in the family. Each member of the family was loved. The main financial burden fell on the head of the family, James. Therefore, the guy got a job that brought a good income. The local company was engaged in the service of festive events, as well as private transportation of wealthy clients. The firm provided limousines and other expensive cars for rent. James got along with his colleagues, was polite and tactful with customers, and in good standing with the management. Time passed. It would seem that having a decent income, the financial well-being of the family should only grow, but instead, for several months in a row, the couple owed rent on the house. They even had their water turned off. The landlords were threatening to evict James and Candy soon. This kept James on his toes, looking for ways to stay off the streets. He had to do something about it. On that unfortunate night, James left his home to take a company-provided automobile. The man was to drive a group of people from Kissimmee, Florida, to Tampa, and then back. The drive was to take no more than 2 hours. James arrived at work around 3 a.m., picked up the vehicle, and left to complete the assignment, but never returned home. Candy became worried as a lot of time had passed and James never made contact. Later, strange messages started coming from him saying that he needed to disappear for a period of time. The poor woman didn't understand anything. Candy began calling family and friends in the hope of finding out where James was and what had happened to him. And on April 4th, the father of the missing man decided to contact the police to report his son's disappearance. On April 21st, 2013, the sheriff's office received a call from a woman who said she knew someone who might be involved in James's death. She claimed that James Schaefer was not missing or a runaway. He was murdered. The witness blamed it on her own sister. The woman said her relative had attacked the man, and now she was going to kill him. Allegedly, at a family meeting, her sister confessed to everyone about killing her best friend under the influence of illegal substances. The caller was then forced to contact the police as she was worried about her demented sister's children. After James's father reported James to the police, the detectives immediately began their investigation. First, they decided to talk to Candy. Perhaps she knew something about her loved one's disappearance or had been causing wariness lately. Candy reported that her husband had gone to work, and nothing in his behavior seemed suspicious to her, except perhaps the messages that came from James and messengers after his disappearance. It later turned out that several other people in the family's inner circle had received similar texts. This information required investigation. The management of the company where James worked explained that the worker was indeed listed as one of the best employees, and such a sudden disappearance was not like him. They helped detectives clarify the time and reconstruct some of the events of that day. James arrived at work to pick up his car, got it ready to leave, and left around 4 a.m. However, the police still managed to find out something interesting. Employees of the firm said that shortly before his disappearance, James complained about financial problems and asked to borrow money. It is quite possible that this could be the reason for his disappearance. The man could have left the city to disappear from unfulfilled obligations and creditors. It was established that James had a gambling addiction. This explained his financial problems and utility and rent arrears. Detectives took this fact as a primary basis, so they continued to contact family relatives and friends. That's how police officers found themselves on the doorstep of James and Candy's friend and neighbor, Angela Stolt. Angela greeted the police officers calmly, telling them that she was saddened by the disappearance of James, who was indeed her friend. He often stopped by her place after his shift for a drink, a heart-to-heart chat, and to relax. They had purely platonic feelings for each other. When Angela was having financial problems, she approached James asking for help, to which he offered to let her do his personal bookkeeping. When asked why his wife wasn't doing it, Angela replied that there was nothing strange about it. Thus, they helped each other. She would get a small reward for the work she did, and he would get his affairs in order. Initially, everything was fine, but at one point he started having financial problems. He wanted to get social support from the state. That's why he decided to involve Angela. So their friendly relationship turned into a dependent relationship on each other. After communicating with Angela, the police officers could not get away from the idea that there was something suspicious about Angela having access to James's accounts. Several transactions that had been made after the man's disappearance raised questions, and their meetings in the mornings after work raised some doubts about the fidelity of the missing man. So the police decided to take a closer look at the family friend. Angela seemed sincere, relaxed. There was no particular reason not to believe her after all. People often ask someone close to them to do the bookkeeping or hire specialists, so Stolt was ruled out as a suspect. Once established, it seemed obvious that James's flight was due to financial problems or something similar. There was money involved in the case. Investigators went to Angela's house again, but this time they decided to do more than just talk outside the house. They also asked to see her home. But what appeared before their eyes threw the representatives of law enforcement agencies into confusion. All the rooms were littered with garbage. Dirty plates with leftovers were everywhere. The leftovers were spoiled, and it all stank. In short, it was unsanitary. It was clear that Angela had some kind of mental problems. However, they did not find James here. This is how Angela tells it. Because of my illness and injuries, I have not been able to properly clean or maintain my house for a long time. The police asked Angela to take part in the formal interrogation, which would be audio recorded. She repeated everything she had said earlier. She also said that her buddy was not addicted to substances, but was an occasional user, with some prescription drugs involved. For James, she said, it was an opportunity to relax on the weekends. Angela also said that the last time she saw the man was after he was reported missing. He came to her home and asked for money, to which she replied that she would not give him $1. The response angered the man, however, he left her home. The police also asked Angela to make a call to James, to explain the situation with the bills, to inform him that there is a big overspend, and that it could turn into something bad, to which she refused, citing the fact that he was no longer in contact with her. Angela also told about the problems at James' work, that someone from the staff threatened him, asking him to return a debt, so the detective's interest shifted to James's co-workers and his boss. A sudden call on April 21, 2013, made adjustments to the investigation of the case. The information could not be ignored. Once again, the detectives went to Angela Stolt, except that there was no trace left of the calm and balanced woman. They were met on the doorstep by a woman who clearly hadn't looked after herself in days. Her hair was sloppy, she seemed to be out of sorts. Her behavior was also inadequate, which was the reason she was deemed dangerous, both to herself and to society. On this basis, Angela was taken into custody, and later she was sent to a psychiatric hospital for 72 hours for the necessary evaluation. Before she was placed in the hospital, she spent some time under arrest at the local police department. So it was established that on April 3, 2013, she picked up James Schaefer from work after completing an order. James was alarmed. He needed to fix the situation or his family would be evicted from the house. Either he and his children would be left on the street, or they would have to move back in with their parents, which wasn't an option either. In addition, he did not want to admit to himself and his family that his difficult financial situation was caused by gambling. He was so eager to win back what he had lost. But luck had turned away from James, and there was no one else to turn to at work. It was embarrassing in front of his co-workers. He'd always repaid his debts before, but now things were going wrong. Maybe Angela will help out, and if not, I'll ask her father to help. He helped me out once before and I paid him back all my debts on time, James pondered. Angela suggested they come in and have a glass of a mixture of peach schnapps and vodka. And for more peace of mind, let's add something else. It'll help you relax, Angela suggested. James was fine with the drug, which, by the way, was only available by prescription. He even crushed the pills himself so that they would dissolve faster and enhance the effect of the alcohol. After drinking a glass, James asked his friend if her father could lend him an amount between $2,000 and $4,000. James knew that his friend's father was seriously ill and literally on the verge of death. Therefore, he himself needed money for treatment, but his situation was desperate. How can he ask such a thing, especially now? He already owes me money. I can barely make ends meet. Angela was indignant, but she didn't let on. You'll have to ask your father about that, Angela replied. James then offered to give her a ride to her parents' house so that she wouldn't have to stall and find out as soon as possible. Hope for a speedy resolution to the trouble settled in his heart. Around 5 a.m., they set out on the road. Since it was still early, Angela's father was asleep, and the woman had changed her mind about going to him. She suggested stopping the car near the cemetery located in Dayton. No one expected what happened afterward. At least that's what Angela told the police. I took James to my favorite place in Dayton, which turned out to be the cemetery, to talk to him alone. I knew he would scream, and I didn't want my kids to be abused anymore. They were being terrorized by their father, and they didn't need any more of that. So when we parked, we turned around in our seats facing each other with our backs against the doors, Angela recalled. She told James that she would not borrow money for him from her father, much less force him to take out loans for that purpose, and that she would stop doing his bookkeeping after they sorted out the bills and Social Security payments. Maul. Enough of him setting her up. Jason became enraged, started screaming and grabbed her by the throat. He screamed, "I'm going to kill you! You can't do that! It's my money!" I grabbed my cell phone that was on the console. He threw it into the back seat of my car, continuing his tirade. Angela describes his condition. According to her, he threatened that he would kill her children as well. Stolt took these threats seriously. To defend herself, She grabbed the first thing she could get her hands on from the trunk. That tool turned out to be an ice axe, which she carried with her as camping and hiking equipment. Angela struck James and hit him in the eye, but he wasn't dead. He was completely disoriented. James began to scream. Angela then took a PVC cord that she used on hikes to climb trees. Wrapping the cord around her roommate's throat, she rested her feet on the back of the driver's seat and began pulling hard on his neck. After a while, the man stopped moving. Angela pulled the ice pick out of the victim's right eye. When asked by the police about where in the car such equipment came from, the neighbor explained that she and her family were going to go camping in the next month. All these gadgets were necessary for her, and she was just storing them in the car. Everyone at Angela's interrogation was horrified. In fact, James hadn't asked for anything supernatural. She could have refused him and stopped communicating with him further. Moreover, they believed that there might not have been any threats from James at all, and that Angela's mental state had played a cruel joke on her. A medical examination later showed that Angela was aware of her own actions during the incident. The police also did not rule out that the crime could have been planned in advance. Firstly, the strange accessories in the car were questionable. Secondly, why leave the house to just talk when it could have been done in front of witnesses? To which Angela also had an answer. I knew he had some violent tendencies in the past, but he had never been violent towards me before. If I thought he was going to use physical force, I wouldn't have taken him to a place where I was in danger. I would have taken him to some public place. He almost killed me. Things could have easily gone differently, and I wouldn't have put myself in that situation. When it was over, Angela was very frightened. According to her, she was in shock, but that didn't stop her from stabbing the other eye again to make sure James was dead. But the gruesome story didn't end there. To avoid getting blood splattered on her car, she wrapped the dead man in a plastic bag. When he finally let go of me, I realized he was dead, got out of the car, and I threw up. It took quite a while before I could breathe, and then I was faced with a new kind of horror. I was on autopilot, my mind strangely shut down, and I just started doing something. I went back to the car to get my cell phone to call the police, but I couldn't find it. So I covered it up as best I could and drove to the police station. As I drove down Fort Smith Boulevard, I panicked, the thoughts going through my head telling me that the police would never believe me. My life was over. I would lose my children. I kept looking at him and the fear kept building. Anyway, with James' corpse, Angela arrived home. After that, she dragged the body to the shed. Here, taking a hacksaw, she began to cut it into pieces. The severed body fragments, Angela decided to put them into pots and pans, oiling them. A remarkable fact is that when Angela first spoke to the police about James's disappearance, his body parts were just being boiled in pots and pans. However, this went unnoticed as the investigators did not enter the house that time. When police first entered Angela's home, Stolt had already completely dismembered the body. She packed the individual parts into garbage bags and scattered them in different parts of the city. Some sources say that she was assisted in this by her older children, whom she told that she had accidentally hit a deer on the road. At the same time, she strictly forbade them to enter the shed so that they would not see the evidence of the crime. Following this confession, Angela was arrested for second-degree murder. Police officers actively searched for James's posture. Out of 206 bones, they were only able to locate 56. James Schaefer was buried in a closed casket. None of his relatives could bid him a proper farewell. Afterwards, the prosecutor's office upgraded the crime to first-degree murder because many facts pointed to a premeditated act. In addition, Angela tried to get rid of the body, covering her tracks, which wanted to confuse the investigation. Investigators believed that the woman's plan was well thought out and also included misinformation of James's relatives. For this purpose, she used his cell phone, from which she wrote to his wife and family, as well as some friends. On December 2nd, 2014, Angela Stolt went on trial. The woman immediately confessed to the murder, but insisted that she did it as a result of self-defense. The prosecutor's office tried to refute her words, as the main motive was considered to be money. Angela had been in financial trouble for most of her life, making her fearful that James would cheat and use her. That morning, when they had been drinking with James, the woman had clearly had too much to drink. Her anger at him, at life, and at the injustice of the men around her spilled out into an assault. On December 5, 2014, the jury retired to deliberate on the verdict. After deliberating, they unanimously found Angela guilty of first-degree murder, as well as abuse of the body, tampering with evidence. As a result, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. What was going on in Angela's head is hard to imagine. A sick mind, a sick body, a tortured soul. However, apparently Angela still doesn't realize what she has done. She didn't just take the life of a man she considered her best friend. She brutalized him without giving him a single chance for salvation. And after all, like a butcher butchering a carcass, she dismembered James and boiled him in a pot. Money had ruined more than one friendship, but to do it this way, you'd better stay away from friends like that.